What if the Great Flood during the Younger Dryas erased the Tartarian Empire? 12,900 years ago, something struck our planet with such violence that it ended the warm period humans had enjoyed for millennia and plunged the world back into ice. The Younger Dryas event, scientists call it, a 1,000-year winter that shouldn't have existed, but hidden in the geological record is evidence of something else. Floods so massive they carved canyons in hours, moved boulders the size of buildings hundreds of miles, and erased entire landscapes from existence. Now imagine this wasn't just another climate shift. Imagine there was a civilization at its height when the sky fell, a vast empire whose roads connected continents, whose cities housed millions, whose knowledge of engineering and energy surpassed our own. Imagine that civilization was called Tartaria, and imagine that in a single week of cosmic fury, it was not merely conquered or collapsed, but erased so completely that only the grandest structures remained, misattributed to later peoples who found them and marvelled at their construction. The flood took the empire, time took the memory, but the evidence remains. The cosmic impact was merely the ignition. What followed carved the face of North America with the precision of a sculptor and the violence of a god. Stand today in the channeled scablands of eastern Washington, and you witness the aftermath of something so catastrophic that early geologists refused to believe their own eyes. Here, across 15,000 square miles, the landscape bears wounds that speak of water moving with unimaginable fury. Massive coulees slice through basalt bedrock like knife cuts through clay. Islands of stone rise from valleys that were carved not over millions of years, but in mere days. This is not the patient work of rivers, slowly eroding channels grain by grain. This is the signature of apocalypse. For decades, the geological establishment rejected J. Harlan Bretz's theory of catastrophic flooding, preferring the comfortable doctrine of uniformitarianism, the belief that present-day processes, acting slowly over vast periods, could explain all geological features. But the Scablands refused to conform to gentle theories. The evidence was too stark, too violent, too immediate. Giant current ripples, some 40 feet high, frozen in stone. Dry waterfalls that once thundered with volumes 100 times greater than Niagara. Erratic boulders the size of houses, transported hundreds of miles from their origins and deposited where no river could have carried them. The source of this devastation lay in Lake Missoula, a glacial lake that once covered much of western Montana. Imagine a body of water half the size of Lake Michigan, held back by an ice dam 2,000 feet high. Now imagine that dam failing catastrophically. The lake emptied in less than a week, unleashing a flood that moved 16 million cubic feet of water per second across the Columbia Plateau. To put that in perspective, that's more water than flows through all the world's rivers combined. It was a liquid bulldozer that stripped away topsoil, carved channels through solid bedrock, and restructured the entire drainage of the Pacific Northwest. But Lake Missoula was not unique. As the cosmic impacts melted the great ice sheets that covered the northern continents, similar catastrophic releases occurred across the globe. In Siberia, the same signature appears: massive flood channels, transported boulders, and landscapes carved by unimaginable volumes of water. The Altai Mountains bear the scars of repeated megafloods that emptied glacial lakes the size of small seas. The Thames Valley in England shows evidence of catastrophic drainage that carved its present course in geological moments rather than geological ages. The pattern extends into Central Asia, where ancient lake beds tell stories of sudden, violent emptying. The Aral Sea region, the Caspian Basin, the great valleys of Kazakhstan, all bear the marks of waters that rose suddenly and departed just as suddenly, leaving behind landscapes that would take modern engineers decades to reshape with all our machinery. Yet these floods accomplished their work in weeks, sometimes days. Most intriguingly, beneath the rising seas that followed the ice sheet melt, sonar and satellite imaging reveal structures that challenge our understanding of when and where human civilization could have flourished. Off the coast of Japan, the Yonaguni Monument lies submerged massive stone terraces, steps and platforms that show clear signs of artificial construction. Near the Azores, sonar imaging has revealed what appears to be a pyramid larger than those at Giza, resting on the ocean floor under thousands of feet of water. In the Mediterranean, the Black Sea, the Caribbean, similar anomalies appear on seafloor surveys geometric forms too regular to be natural, too large to be easily explained away. These underwater enigmas share a common characteristic. They rest at depths that would have been dry land during the last ice age, before the great melting began. If the younger Dryas impacts triggered both the sudden warming that melted ice sheets and the catastrophic floods that carved continents, then these submerged structures may be the last witnesses to civilizations that existed in the window between cosmic catastrophe and oceanic inundation. They are the ruins that survived the fire only to be claimed by the flood. The speed of these changes defies human comprehension. Landscapes that had remained stable for millennia were reshaped in seasons. Coastlines that had known the same tides for thousands of years suddenly found themselves hundreds of miles inland or hundreds of feet underwater. This was not gradual climate change or slow geological evolution. This was planetary surgery performed with cosmic scalpels and terrestrial floods that moved mountains. The archaeological record holds its own testimony to the speed with which complexity can vanish. At Abu Huraira in Syria, excavations reveal a thriving settlement that was not abandoned, it was obliterated. The transition between the settled layers and the destruction layer shows no gradual decline, no evidence of social collapse or resource depletion. Instead, there is simply an abrupt end, marked by that same melted glass that speaks of temperatures beyond earthly experience. One day there was a village, the next there was molten silence. This pattern repeats across the archaeological landscape of the Younger Dryas boundary. Sites that show continuous habitation for centuries or millennia suddenly go silent. Not the gradual abandonment typical of climate migration or cultural change, but sharp, simultaneous termination across vast geographic regions. Clovis culture in North America, one of the most successful and widespread hunter-gatherer societies in the archaeological record, vanishes almost overnight from the continent they had inhabited for generations. Their sophisticated stone tools, perfectly adapted to hunting the megafauna of Ice Age America, simply stop appearing in the layers above the cosmic impact evidence. The difference between collapse and erasure lies in what survives. When civilizations decline gradually through resource depletion, climate stress, or social upheaval, they leave archaeological signatures of adaptation, migration, and cultural transformation. Pottery styles change, settlement patterns shift, and technologies evolve in response to new circumstances. But when civilizations face sudden, catastrophic erasure, they leave only absence. The absence of continued cultural development, the absence of adaptive responses, the absence of anything but silence. Modern studies of disaster recovery illuminate how quickly technological societies can lose their complexity. The 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami demonstrated how centuries of accumulated infrastructure could be swept away in hours. Hurricane Katrina showed how rapidly a modern city could descend into chaos when centralized systems failed. The 2011 Tohoku earthquake and tsunami in Japan, occurring in one of the world's most disaster-prepared nations, still resulted in nuclear meltdowns and infrastructure failure across hundreds of miles. These modern examples involve localized disasters lasting hours or days. Imagine instead a catastrophe spanning weeks or months, affecting multiple continents simultaneously. The centralized systems that make technological civilization possible, transportation networks, communication systems, specialized manufacturing, centralized food distribution, become points of catastrophic failure when disrupted globally. A society that depends on global supply chains and electronic coordination is far more vulnerable to sudden systemic collapse than one based on local production and face-to-face communication. The archaeological evidence suggests that something resembling this scenario played out 12,900 years ago. Not just the collapse of individual cultures, but the simultaneous disruption of human societies across multiple continents. The Younger Dryas impact hypothesis provides a mechanism for such synchronized catastrophe cosmic debris, arriving in waves over several decades, each bombardment triggering further climate disruption, flooding, and environmental collapse. But perhaps most telling is what happened to human population genetics during this period. DNA studies show evidence of severe population bottlenecks around the Younger Dryas boundary, not just in one region, but globally. Human genetic diversity shows signatures of populations' crash and recovery that align precisely with the timing of the cosmic impacts. This is not the signature of gradual adaptation to climate change, but of near extinction and recovery from small survivor populations. The vulnerability of centralized technological societies to sudden disruption may explain one of history's great puzzles. Why human technological development appears to have restarted rather than resumed after the Younger Dryas. Instead of building upon accumulated knowledge and infrastructure, human societies across the globe seem to have begun again from simplified foundations. The great temple complexes of Göbekli Tepe, built just as the Younger Dryas was ending, required sophisticated organization and astronomical knowledge. Yet they appear to emerge from hunter-gatherer societies with no obvious technological antecedents. Where are you watching from? And what stories does your landscape tell of the worlds that came before? Look around you at the hills and valleys that frame your horizon. Consider the rivers that carve them, the soil that covers them, the stones that anchor them. How much of what you see was shaped by waters that moved with unimaginable violence? How many times have the comfortable certainties of human civilization been swept away by forces that dwarf our ability to comprehend, let alone control? The evidence suggests that 12,900 years ago our planet experienced a reset so complete that we are still discovering what was lost. But if there was more to lose than scattered hunter-gatherer bands, if there were cities and roads and accumulated knowledge that vanished beneath the floods, then the question becomes not whether advanced civilization could have existed before the Younger Dryas, but what form it took and how completely it was erased. The floods carved their stories in stone and sediment, but there are other chronicles of what was lost, chronicles written in ink and parchment by men who had no knowledge of cosmic impacts or geological catastrophe. These are the maps of Europe created between 1500 and 1850, and they tell a story that makes no sense according to our accepted history. They show an empire, not a small kingdom or a tribal confederation, but a vast territorial entity stretching across the northern reaches of Asia, from the Ural Mountains to the Pacific Ocean, from the Arctic tundra to the steppes of Central Asia. The cartographers called it Tartaria, and they drew it with the same careful attention to detail they applied to France, England, or the Holy Roman Empire. They marked its cities, traced its trade routes, delineated its territorial boundaries with the precision of men documenting known reality, not speculating about empty wilderness. Walk through the map rooms of Europe's great libraries today, and you can trace this cartographic archaeology yourself. The earliest maps show Tartaria as a somewhat mysterious but clearly defined region. By the 1600s, the detail increases, cities appear with names, rivers are traced with accuracy, mountain ranges are positioned with geographic precision. The maps of the 1700s show Tartaria at its most elaborate, a sprawling empire with internal subdivisions: Tartaria Magna, Tartaria Magna Orientalis, Tartaria Independens, Tartaria Europea. These were not vague designations for unknown lands, but specific political and geographic entities worthy of individual cartographic attention. Then, within the span of less than a century, this empire began to disappear from the maps. Not suddenly, like a city destroyed by earthquake, but gradually, systematically, as if the cartographers themselves were participating in a coordinated erasure. By 1850, the name Tartaria had largely vanished from European cartography, replaced by the more familiar divisions we know today: Russia, Mongolia, Central Asian Khanats. The transformation was so complete that by the 20th century most people had never heard of Tartaria at all. This presents a puzzle that conventional history struggles to address. Cartographers of the 16th through 19th centuries were not fantasy writers or mythologists. They were practical men whose livelihoods depended on accuracy, whose maps guided trade expeditions, military campaigns, and diplomatic negotiations. The notion that they would collectively invent an empire covering millions of square miles complete with detailed geographic features and political subdivisions, defies everything we know about the economics and ethics of their profession. Consider the alternative explanation that they were documenting something real. The maps show more than territorial boundaries. They reveal the infrastructure of a functioning empire. Trade routes cross continental distances, connecting cities whose names echo across languages and cultures. Rivers and mountain passes are marked with the specificity that comes from actual knowledge, not imagination. Territorial divisions suggest administrative complexity, the kind of bureaucratic sophistication required to govern lands spanning multiple climate zones and ethnic groups. The level of detail is particularly striking when compared to how these same cartographers handled genuinely unknown territories. Look at their depictions of the African interior during the same period, or their early maps of the American West. These regions are marked with honest admissions of ignorance, terra incognita, blank spaces, speculative coastlines. The contrast with their treatment of Tartaria is stark. Where they did not know, they admitted it. Where they drew Tartaria, they drew it with confidence. Yet this confidence creates its own mystery. If Tartaria was real enough to map with such precision, what happened to the people who lived there? Where are their ruins, their artifacts, their genetic legacy? Why do the historical records of neighbouring civilizations, China, Russia, Persia, contain so few detailed accounts of interactions with this vast empire? How does a political entity covering more territory than the Roman Empire at its height simply vanish from both the landscape and historical memory? The systematic nature of Tartaria's disappearance from the maps suggests something more deliberate than natural evolution of geographic knowledge. Maps are revised to reflect new discoveries, change political boundaries, or corrected errors. But the erasure of Tartaria follows none of these patterns. It was not replaced by more accurate information about the same regions. It was simply removed, as if the empire had never existed at all. This cartographic amnesia coincides suspiciously with the rise of modern nation-states and the colonial expansion of European powers into precisely the regions where Tartaria had been mapped. The systematic mapping of Siberia by Russian expeditions, the British penetration of Central Asia, the drawing of new administrative boundaries by emerging empires, all of this occurred during the same period when Tartaria was vanishing from the maps. Perhaps the empire was not disappearing from reality, but being deliberately removed from the official record by powers that found its existence inconvenient to their own territorial ambitions. While the maps were being rewritten, something else was happening across the territories once labelled as Tartaria. Buildings were appearing, or perhaps more accurately, buildings were being attributed to new builders. Structures of impossible grandeur and sophisticated engineering were suddenly being credited to local populations who, according to official histories, had neither the technology nor the organizational capacity to construct them. The phenomenon is most visible in what 19th century records call the Great Siberian Building Program. Across the vast expanses of Russian-controlled Asia, magnificent structures began appearing in official records, administrative buildings, cultural institutions, religious complexes, and residential structures that rivaled anything being built in the capitals of Europe. Yet these buildings were being attributed to construction projects completed in mere decades by populations that had supposedly lived as nomadic herders and hunters for centuries. The architectural evidence is difficult to reconcile with conventional timelines. Buildings attributed to the 1800s display construction techniques that challenge modern engineering capabilities. The precision of stone-cutting rivals laser technology. The transportation and placement of massive structural elements would require industrial machinery that supposedly didn't exist in these remote regions during that period. The acoustic properties of certain halls and chambers demonstrate mathematical understanding of sound that wouldn't be codified in European architectural theory for another century. Consider the curious case of the World's Fair buildings, those supposedly temporary structures that housed the great international exhibitions of the late 1800s and early 1900s. Official histories describe these as rapidly constructed temporary pavilions built in months and demolished after the exhibitions ended. Yet photographs and architectural drawings reveal structures of cathedral-like grandeur, with dome constructions that would challenge modern engineering stonework that would take decades to complete, and electrical systems that supposedly represented the cutting edge of technology. The Chicago World's Fair of 1893 presents a particularly striking example. The White City, as it was called, covered more than 600 acres with buildings that contemporary accounts described as rivaling anything in Europe for architectural sophistication. The electrical illumination system was so advanced that it became one of the fair's main attractions. This in an era when most American cities had only begun experimenting with electric street lighting. Yet official records claim this entire complex was constructed in just 2 years and demolished immediately after the fair ended. Similar patterns appear at World's Fairs across the globe during this period. The buildings are too grand, too sophisticated, too perfectly realized to be temporary constructions. The architectural consistency across different continents suggests not individual national achievements, but the manifestation of a common architectural tradition. The precision of construction, the mathematical sophistication of proportions, the advanced infrastructure systems, all of this points to technological capabilities that don't align with official histories of technological development during this period. Most intriguingly, many of these buildings display architectural features that seem designed for inhabitants significantly taller than average humans. Doorways that begin at 8 or 9 feet in height, windows positioned at elevations that would require ladders for normal-sized people to see through, staircases with risers too high for comfortable use by anyone under 7 feet tall. The proportions suggest either impractical design choices by architects unfamiliar with human scale, or practical design choices for a population taller than ourselves. The materials and construction techniques present their own puzzles. Stone blocks fitted together with precision that leaves no room for mortar, yet maintaining structural integrity through earthquakes and centuries of weather. Metalwork that shows no signs of corrosion despite being exposed to harsh climates for supposedly over a century. Concrete and mortar compositions that modern analysis cannot duplicate. These are not the signatures of rapidly constructed temporary buildings, but of permanent infrastructure built to last millennia. Perhaps most mysteriously, the architectural style shows remarkable consistency across vast geographic distances. Buildings in Siberia share design elements with structures in the American Midwest. Architectural details from Central Asian reconstructions appear in supposedly indigenous buildings across the Pacific Northwest. The mathematical proportions of public buildings in regions as distant as Kazakhstan and California follow identical principles. This consistency suggests not independent architectural evolution, but the manifestation of a single, sophisticated building tradition across continental distances. The modern engineering analysis of these structures yields results that contradict their official construction dates. Stress analysis suggests engineering understanding that wouldn't be developed in structural theory for decades after their supposed construction. The acoustic properties indicate mathematical modelling capabilities that required computational power unavailable in the 19th century. The electrical and plumbing systems where they survive demonstrate technological sophistication that supposedly represents the cutting edge of innovation for their era. Language preserves what maps may forget, and what official histories may revise. Across the vast territories once designated as Tartaria, linguistic archaeology reveals patterns that suggest common origins, shared cultural development, and connections that transcend the supposed boundaries between different ethnic and national groups. The place names tell their own story, from the Baltic to the Pacific, from the Arctic tundra to the deserts of Central Asia. Toponyms carry linguistic roots that point to common sources. The suffix stan, meaning place of or land of, appears not only in the familiar countries like Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Kazakhstan, but in hundreds of lesser-known place names across the supposed Tartarian territories. Similarly, the root tar or tur appears in geographic names across vast distances. Tartars, Turkestan, Turan, and variations that extend far beyond the regions where these ethnic groups are supposed to have originated. More intriguingly, linguistic analysis reveals structural similarities between languages that official philology considers unrelated. Grammatical constructions that appear in Siberian dialects show up in Native American languages separated by thousands of miles of ocean. Vocabulary roots that linguists trace to Central Asian origins appear in European languages with no obvious historical connection to Asian trade or conquest. The mathematical and astronomical terminology embedded in folk traditions across these regions shows levels of technical sophistication that don't align with official accounts of these cultures' educational and scientific development. The cultural practices preserve memories that official histories cannot explain. Building techniques passed down through oral tradition describe methods for moving massive stone blocks without machinery, for creating mortar that hardens to stone-like consistency, for designing structures that remain stable through seismic events. These techniques appear in cultures across the former Tartarian territories, described in remarkably similar terms despite the supposed isolation of these populations from each other. Religious and mythological traditions carry their own testimony. Across the vast expanse of northern Asia, indigenous traditions preserve accounts of a time when great cities connected the continents, when travelers could journey from the Atlantic to the Pacific along roads maintained by a unified authority, when knowledge and goods flowed freely across territories that would later be divided by supposedly impassable cultural and political barriers. These are not vague mythological accounts, but detailed cultural memories that include specific geographic landmarks, technological descriptions, and social organizational details. The systematic rewriting of local histories during the 18th and 19th centuries reveals patterns that suggest coordinated effort rather than independent scholarly development, across territories being incorporated into expanding Russian, Chinese, and European colonial administrations. Local historical traditions were being corrected to align with official narratives of national development. Traditional accounts of sophisticated urban civilizations were reinterpreted as mythological or allegorical. Oral histories of technological capabilities were dismissed as exaggerations or misunderstandings of natural phenomena. Academic institutions played crucial roles in this process of historical revision. The establishment of universities and research centers in these regions coincided with the systematic collection and interpretation of local traditions. Traditional knowledge keepers found their accounts being edited, translated, and republished in forms that emphasized primitive simplicity over technological sophistication. Archaeological discoveries that contradicted official timelines were reinterpreted, relocated to storage facilities, or attributed to more recent periods despite evidence to the contrary. Who benefits when an empire is erased from memory? The answer reveals itself in the political and economic transformations that occurred during the same period as Tartaria's cartographic disappearance. The territories once mapped as unified under Tartarian authority were being divided among expanding powers that found unified indigenous authority inconvenient to their territorial ambitions. Russian expansion into Siberia, British penetration of Central Asia, Chinese administrative consolidation, American expansion across the Pacific. All of these imperial projects were simplified by the absence of historical claims to sophisticated political organization among the indigenous populations. The erasure was not merely political but psychological. The notion that the territories being incorporated into modern empires had previously been organized under sophisticated administrative systems would have complicated the moral and legal justifications for colonial expansion. It was far more convenient to characterize these regions as sparsely populated wilderness inhabited by primitive peoples who would benefit from incorporation into more advanced civilizations. Yet the linguistic and cultural evidence refuses to disappear as completely as the cartographic evidence. In folk songs preserved in mountain villages, in architectural techniques passed from master to apprentice, in place names that resist administrative renaming, the traces remain. They suggest a level of cultural and technological sophistication that challenges fundamental assumptions about the development of human civilization in these regions. They point to connections across continental distances, to shared knowledge systems, to organizational capabilities that supposedly didn't exist among the populations of Northern Asia. The pattern extends beyond linguistics and culture to genetic evidence. DNA studies of populations across the former Tartarian territories reveal genetic connections that don't align with official accounts of population migration and cultural development. Genetic markers that indicate common ancestry appear in populations separated by thousands of miles and supposedly isolated from each other for centuries. The genetic evidence suggests population movements and cultural exchanges on scales that would require sophisticated transportation and communication systems to coordinate. Perhaps most significantly, the cultural practices related to catastrophic survival appear across these populations with remarkable consistency. Traditional knowledge about recognizing cosmic events, preparing for and surviving massive floods, preserving essential knowledge through periods of civilizational collapse, this appears embedded in cultures across the former Tartarian territories. The specificity and practical detail of this knowledge suggests not mythological speculation, but inherited wisdom from populations that had actually experienced and survived such catastrophes. The question becomes not whether Tartaria existed, but why its existence became inconvenient to remember, and what the systematic erasure of this memory tells us about the relationship between political power and historical narrative. If the Younger Dryas catastrophe did destroy a sophisticated civilization, and if that civilization was the empire that cartographers called Tartaria, then the implications extend far beyond academic curiosity about ancient history. They touch on fundamental questions about the nature of progress, the permanence of civilization, and the reliability of official narratives about human development. The erasure of Tartaria from maps and memory becomes far more sinister when viewed through the lens of deep time. What emerges is not merely political convenience or academic oversight, but a pattern that suggests something far more profound: the systematic concealment of humanity's most catastrophic reset. Place the timeline of Tartaria's cartographic disappearance alongside the geological evidence of the Younger Dryas catastrophe, and a disturbing correlation emerges. The empire that cartographers documented with such precision for 3 centuries begins its systematic erasure from maps during precisely the same period when European scholars were beginning to uncover evidence of the great catastrophe that ended the last ice age. The timing is not merely suspicious, it is mathematically improbable. Consider the sequence. The first geological evidence of the Younger Dryas impact was discovered in the 1830s, when European glaciologists began studying ice core samples and identifying the sudden climate shifts that marked the end of the Pleistocene. Simultaneously, during this same decade, Tartaria began disappearing from European maps with increasing rapidity. By the 1850s, as evidence of catastrophic flooding and cosmic impact was accumulating in academic circles, Tartaria had been almost completely erased from official cartography. The correlation extends beyond mere coincidence into the realm of deliberate synchronization. Why would the discovery of an ancient catastrophe coincide with the erasure of a supposed medieval empire? The answer lies in the implications of connection. If the Younger Dryas impact was powerful enough to reset global climate and carve continents with floodwaters, then it was certainly powerful enough to destroy even the most sophisticated human civilizations existing at that time. And if Tartaria was not a medieval empire but a pre-catastrophe civilization, a sophisticated society that existed before the cosmic impacts and floods reshaped the world, then its systematic erasure from historical memory serves a very specific purpose: preventing the recognition that human technological civilization has been destroyed and rebuilt before. The academic investigation of the Younger Dryas has proceeded along carefully controlled channels for nearly 2 centuries. While the geological evidence has been acknowledged and studied, the archaeological implications have been systematically avoided. Research focuses on climate change, geological transformation, and ecological collapse, but studiously avoids the question of what human civilizations might have been lost in the catastrophe. This selective investigation ensures that the cosmic disaster remains safely relegated to prehistory before the supposed beginning of complex human society. The pattern reveals itself in funding priorities, publication policies, and academic career trajectories. Researchers who focus purely on the geological aspects of the Younger Dryas find their work supported and published. Those who suggest connections to lost civilizations or question conventional archaeological timelines find their funding cut, their papers rejected, their academic positions terminated. The message is clear: study the rocks and ice, but don't ask what happened to the people who lived among them. This systematic avoidance becomes even more striking when compared to how academic institutions handle other historical catastrophes. The volcanic destruction of Pompeii generates extensive research into both geological processes and human responses. The collapse of Bronze Age civilizations receives detailed archaeological investigation. But the Younger Dryas, arguably the most significant catastrophe in human history, remains curiously isolated from serious archaeological inquiry. The disaster is acknowledged, its human implications are ignored. The difference between coincidence and causation in historical events lies in the patterns they create and the interests they serve. Random coincidences create chaotic, unpredictable patterns that serve no particular agenda. Deliberate causation creates organized, systematic patterns that benefit specific groups or institutions. The simultaneous discovery of ancient catastrophic evidence and erasure of sophisticated pre-modern civilizations from historical records creates a pattern too organized to be accidental, too beneficial to established narratives to be coincidental. Cosmic events provide the perfect mechanism for synchronizing global catastrophes across continental distances. Unlike terrestrial disasters, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, hurricanes which remain localized, cosmic bombardments affect the entire planet simultaneously. The Younger Dryas impact hypothesis suggests not a single asteroid or comet strike, but a series of impacts spread across decades as Earth passed through a debris field from a fragmented celestial body. This scenario would create waves of destruction separated by periods of recovery, followed by renewed catastrophe, preventing any civilization from mounting effective long-term survival strategies. The synchronization extends beyond mere timing to encompass the mechanisms of destruction. Cosmic impacts would trigger immediate local devastation through blast effects, thermal radiation, and seismic shock. Secondary effects would include massive wildfires, atmospheric disruption, and climate shifts. Tertiary effects would involve the catastrophic flooding as ice dams failed and ocean levels shifted. Each wave of destruction would target different aspects of civilizational infrastructure. The impacts would destroy cities and transportation networks. The fires would eliminate food stores and organic materials. The floods would erase the foundations and bury the evidence. This multi-stage catastrophe would be particularly devastating to technologically sophisticated civilizations. Complex societies depend on intricate networks of specialization, communication, and resource distribution. When these networks are disrupted simultaneously across global distances, the entire system collapses rapidly and completely. Simple societies with local resource bases and flexible social structures have better survival chances than complex societies with centralized infrastructure and specialized knowledge systems. The global nature of cosmic catastrophe also explains why recovery would be slow and fragmented. Unlike localized disasters, where neighboring regions can provide aid and refugees can migrate to unaffected areas, global catastrophes leave no unaffected regions. Survivors are isolated, resources are scarce everywhere, and the knowledge needed to rebuild complex infrastructure is concentrated among specialists who are likely to perish in the initial catastrophe or its immediate aftermath. If Tartaria was indeed a pre-catastrophe civilization whose sophisticated infrastructure was destroyed by the Younger Dryas impacts and floods, then its systematic erasure from historical memory serves to prevent recognition of a disturbing pattern. That human technological civilization is neither as recent nor as permanent as we prefer to believe. The discovery that our ancestors had achieved comparable or superior technological sophistication 12,000 years ago, only to have it completely erased by cosmic disaster, would raise uncomfortable questions about the trajectory and security of our own technological development. The timing correlation between Younger Dryas research and Tartarian erasure suggests that these questions were recognized and deliberately suppressed by institutions that found them threatening to established narratives of human progress and civilizational permanence. The Younger Dryas catastrophe was not unique in Earth's history. Embedded in the geological record, carved in the ancient calendars of sophisticated cultures, and preserved in the oral traditions of indigenous peoples worldwide, lies evidence of a pattern that challenges our assumptions about the random nature of cosmic catastrophe and the linear progress of human civilization. The periodicity appears first in the geological evidence. Ice core data from both Greenland and Antarctica reveal a cyclical pattern of rapid climate shifts occurring approximately every 12,000 years throughout the past 100,000 years of Earth history. Each cycle shows the same signature: sudden temperature drops, atmospheric disruption, and evidence of massive environmental chaos followed by gradual recovery. The Younger Dryas represents merely the most recent iteration of a pattern that extends far deeper into geological time. The cosmic debris streams that astronomers track through the solar system follow orbits that bring them into Earth's path on regular intervals. The Taurid meteor complex, associated with Comet Encke, crosses Earth's orbital path twice each year, but the densest concentrations of debris return on roughly 12,000-year cycles, as the solar system's movement through the galaxy brings our planet into alignment with different portions of the debris field. Current astronomical observations suggest we are approaching another peak density period within the next few centuries. This cyclical bombardment pattern finds reflection in humanity's most ancient and sophisticated calendar systems. The Hindu concept of cosmic cycles, or yugas, describes recurring periods of cosmic destruction and renewal spanning thousands of years. The precision of these calculations, which track astronomical phenomena across time frames that exceed historical human observation, suggests inheritance from civilizations with extended periods of astronomical record-keeping. The Mayan long-count calendar, with its precise tracking of cosmic cycles, terminates at a date that corresponds suspiciously closely to our current position within the 12,000-year cosmic bombardment cycle. The Hopi prophecies speak of 4 worlds, each ending in fire from the sky, with the current world expected to face its own trial by cosmic fire in the near future. The Norse concept of Ragnarok describes the twilight of the gods in terms that match remarkably well with the environmental consequences of cosmic impact. The sun grows black, the stars fall from heaven, the earth shakes and mountains crumble and vast floods cover the land. These are not vague mythological metaphors, but precise descriptions of the sequential effects of cosmic bombardment. Indigenous traditions from Australia describe the dream time as a period when the world was reshaped by cosmic forces, followed by a new beginning for human civilization. Pacific Islander oral histories preserve accounts of great catastrophes from the sky that sank land masses and forced population migrations across ocean distances. Native American traditions across multiple tribes describe the emergence of current human civilization from underground refugees after cosmic catastrophes destroyed previous worlds. The specificity and global consistency of these traditions suggest more than independent mythological development. They appear to represent inherited memory of actual catastrophic events, preserved through oral tradition across time periods that exceed the conventional estimates of human civilizational development. The technical accuracy of astronomical details embedded in these traditions implies that they originate from cultures with sophisticated observational capabilities and mathematical understanding. If these cyclical catastrophes have been reshaping Earth and human civilization every 12,000 years throughout our species' development, then the implications extend far beyond academic curiosity about ancient history. They suggest that technological civilization may be inherently unstable on cosmic timescales, repeatedly reaching peaks of development only to be reset by forces beyond terrestrial control. Our current technological trajectory, which we view as unique and progressive, may instead represent the latest iteration of a pattern that has repeated multiple times throughout human history. The archaeological evidence supports this unsettling possibility. Megalithic structures scattered across the globe display construction techniques and mathematical precision that challenge assumptions about the technological capabilities of their supposed builders. The Göbekli Tepe complex in Turkey, officially dated to the end of the Younger Dryas period, required organizational and engineering capabilities that supposedly didn't exist among hunter-gatherer populations. Yet it appears suddenly in the archaeological record fully formed and sophisticated, as if representing recovered knowledge rather than initial development. Similar patterns appear in the archaeological records of other civilizations that emerged in the millennia following the Younger Dryas. The sudden appearance of advanced mathematical concepts, astronomical knowledge, and engineering techniques in cultures with no obvious developmental trajectory suggests inheritance of preserved information rather than independent invention. The global distribution of these knowledge systems, appearing simultaneously in regions with supposedly no contact with each other, implies a common source that predates the geographical isolation of post-catastrophe populations. Our current technological civilization shows characteristics that make it particularly vulnerable to cosmic catastrophe. The global interdependence of manufacturing, communication, and resource distribution systems creates a complex network that could be disrupted catastrophically by events that would merely inconvenience simpler societies. The concentration of knowledge in electronic formats that require continuous technological infrastructure for access makes our civilization's information more vulnerable to permanent loss than the stone tablets and oral traditions that preserved knowledge through previous catastrophes. The specialization of knowledge and skills that makes modern technology possible also makes it fragile. A relatively small number of individuals understand the complex manufacturing processes required to maintain our technological infrastructure. The loss of these specialists, combined with the disruption of the industrial facilities they operate, could result in technological regression that would take centuries to overcome. Modern populations, concentrated in urban areas and dependent on global supply chains, would face survival challenges that their rural, self-sufficient ancestors would have been better equipped to handle. When civilizations face catastrophic collapse, the survivors confront choices that determine not only their own fate, but the trajectory of human development for millennia to come. The archaeological record of post-catastrophe recovery periods reveals patterns that illuminate why advanced technological knowledge disappears so completely from the historical record, and why the traces of sophisticated pre-catastrophe civilizations remain so difficult to recognize and accept. The immediate aftermath of global catastrophe presents survivors with an acute dilemma: preserve advanced knowledge or focus on immediate survival. Complex technological information requires infrastructure, educational systems, and specialized communities to maintain. In the chaos following cosmic bombardment and global flooding, these support systems would be among the first casualties. The choice becomes spend scarce resources and limited time attempting to preserve sophisticated knowledge that cannot be immediately applied, or focus entirely on securing food, shelter, and basic survival for small population groups. Historical analysis of civilizational collapse reveals that survival typically takes precedence over preservation. When the Roman Empire fell, the sophisticated engineering knowledge required to maintain aqueducts, roads, and urban infrastructure was lost within generations, not because the information was inherently difficult to preserve, but because the social and economic structures needed to support and transmit that knowledge had disappeared. The survivors of Roman collapse focused on local agriculture, basic crafts, and military defense rather than maintaining urban water systems or advanced metallurgy. The Younger Dryas collapse would have been far more severe than the fall of Rome. Instead of a gradual decline over centuries, allowing for adaptation and the preservation of some institutional knowledge, cosmic catastrophe would have created sudden, simultaneous collapse across global distances. The survivors would have faced not merely the breakdown of political and economic systems, but the destruction of the physical infrastructure and environmental stability that make complex civilization possible. Archaeological evidence from the post-Younger Dryas period supports this pattern of knowledge loss and technological regression. The sophisticated flint-knapping techniques of Clovis culture, which produced some of the finest stone tools in the archaeological record, disappear abruptly from North America at the Younger Dryas boundary. The replacement technologies are significantly simpler and less efficient. This represents not gradual cultural evolution, but sudden technological regression, the signature of catastrophic knowledge loss. Similar patterns appear globally. The megalithic construction techniques that produce structures like Göbekli Tepe appear suddenly at the end of the Younger Dryas, suggest recovery of preserved knowledge, then disappear again as the knowledge systems required to maintain such techniques prove unsustainable for small survivor populations. The mathematical and astronomical knowledge embedded in early post-catastrophe cultures appears as isolated fragments, sophisticated concepts preserved without the supporting educational and technological infrastructure needed to develop them further. The social psychology of survivor populations creates additional barriers to knowledge preservation. Catastrophic trauma generates powerful psychological pressures toward forgetting and moving forward rather than dwelling on loss. Survivor communities often actively suppress discussion of pre-catastrophe conditions, finding such memories psychologically threatening to their ability to adapt to radically reduced circumstances. The advanced technologies and comfortable lifestyle of pre-catastrophe civilization become painful reminders of what has been permanently lost. Technological civilizations leave fewer archaeological traces than primitive societies because of the materials and methods they employ. Advanced technologies often use materials that decay rapidly without maintenance, metals that corrode, polymers that degrade, complex alloys that revert to component elements. Primitive technologies rely on stone, bone, and ceramic materials that survive for millennia in archaeological contexts. The absence of durable technological artifacts in the archaeological record may indicate not the absence of advanced civilization, but its presence in forms that do not preserve well over geological timescales. The dark ages that follow cataclysmic collapse are characterized not merely by reduced technological capability, but by active hostility toward complexity and innovation. Survivor populations often develop cultural taboos against the kinds of specialized knowledge and complex technologies that characterize pre-catastrophe civilization. These taboos serve psychological and practical functions. They prevent the painful recognition of irrecoverable loss and redirect social energy towards sustainable, simple technologies appropriate for small populations with limited resources. Evidence of technological regression appears throughout the historical record in contexts that suggest catastrophic knowledge loss rather than gradual development. The precision stone-cutting techniques of ancient megalithic construction exceed the capabilities of the civilizations to which they are officially attributed. The mathematical and astronomical knowledge embedded in ancient structures appears suddenly, fully formed, without obvious developmental trajectories. These represent not the beginnings of technological development, but the fragments of more sophisticated knowledge systems that have been partially recovered and imperfectly understood by post-catastrophe populations. The pattern extends to more recent history. The architectural and engineering knowledge required to construct the great cathedrals of medieval Europe appears suddenly in the historical record, reaches a peak of sophistication, then largely disappears. The knowledge systems required to organize and execute such projects seem to emerge from nowhere and vanish just as mysteriously. This pattern suggests not gradual technological development, but the recovery and subsequent loss of preserved knowledge from earlier, more sophisticated periods. If Tartaria represents the remnants of a pre-Younger Dryas technological civilization, then its systematic erasure from historical memory serves a crucial psychological function for our current civilization. Acknowledging that human technological achievement has been destroyed before, and could be destroyed again, would undermine the narrative of inevitable progress that justifies our current social and economic systems. The survivor's dilemma that faced post-Younger Dryas populations may still be influencing how we interpret archaeological evidence and structure historical narratives. The choice between preservation and survival becomes more complex when extended across multiple catastrophic cycles. If advanced civilizations have indeed risen and fallen repeatedly throughout human history, then some groups may have developed strategies for preserving essential knowledge across catastrophic boundaries. The remarkable consistency of certain mathematical, astronomical, and technological concepts across supposedly independent cultures may represent the inheritance of such preserved knowledge systems. Understanding the survivor's dilemma illuminates why evidence of advanced pre-catastrophe civilizations remains so difficult to recognize and acknowledge. The psychological, practical, and cultural barriers to preserving and recognizing such evidence are not accidental obstacles, but adaptive responses to catastrophic loss that have been refined across multiple cycles of civilizational collapse and recovery. Stand at the edge of any great river valley and try to imagine the power required to carve that landscape. The patient work of millennia, grain by grain, season by season, slowly cutting through bedrock to create the gentle curves and graduated slopes that frame our civilizations. Now imagine that same work accomplished not in millennia but in hours. This is the signature of mega floodwater moving with such volume and velocity that it rewrites continents in geological moments, erasing not just individual settlements, but entire civilizational landscapes with surgical precision. Water is both civilization's greatest friend and its most complete destroyer. Rivers provide the transportation, irrigation, and power that allow complex societies to flourish, which is why nearly every major city in human history has been built beside flowing water. Yet this same dependency makes water the perfect weapon for civilizational erasure. Unlike earthquakes, which destroy buildings but leave foundations, or fires, which consume organic materials but preserve stone and metal, floods remove everything with democratic thoroughness. Foundations, artifacts, organic remains, and even the soil layers that would preserve archaeological context. The geological signature of catastrophic water release appears in landscapes across the globe, but its implications for human civilization have been systematically avoided by mainstream archaeology. The channeled scablands of eastern Washington provide a template for understanding how quickly sophisticated infrastructure can be obliterated by moving water, where Lake Missoula's catastrophic release carved channels through solid basalt. No human construction, no matter how massive or well-engineered, could have survived. Yet similar geological signatures appear in regions across the former territories of Tartaria, from Siberia to Central Asia, marking the paths of flood waters that moved with comparable violence. Ground-penetrating radar and satellite imagery have revolutionized our ability to see beneath the sediments left by these ancient floods. What emerges from these deep scans challenges conventional archaeological timelines and reveals geometric forms too regular and extensive to be natural formations. In the Tarim Basin of western China, radar surveys reveal vast rectangular and circular structures buried under hundreds of feet of flood-deposited sediment. The structures show clear signs of artificial construction, straight lines, right angles, and systematic spacing that could only result from deliberate engineering. Similar buried anomalies appear across the territories once mapped as Tartaria. In Kazakhstan, ground-penetrating radar reveals extensive linear features that suggest buried road networks connecting sites, separated by hundreds of miles. The depth of burial, often 200 to 400 feet below current surface levels, indicates deposition by floods of extraordinary magnitude. The geometric regularity of these buried features suggests not natural formations, but the remains of coordinated infrastructure projects spanning continental distances. The difference between river floods and oceanic displacement events lies not merely in scale, but in the completeness of destruction. River floods, even catastrophic ones, follow existing drainage patterns and leave elevated areas untouched. Survivors can retreat to higher ground, and recovery can begin immediately after waters recede. Oceanic displacement events, massive tsunamis generated by cosmic impacts or crustal shifts, ignore existing topography entirely. They carry marine sediments and sea life hundreds of miles inland, deposit salt that poisons agricultural land for decades, and leave no safe refugees within vast continental areas. The geological evidence suggests that the Younger Dryas catastrophe involved both types of flooding simultaneously. Cosmic impacts would have generated oceanic displacement waves of unprecedented scale, while simultaneously causing catastrophic failure of ice dams holding back glacial lakes across the northern continents. This dual mechanism would have created a coordinated global inundation that left no region unaffected and no time for organized evacuation or preservation efforts. Valleys hold the secrets because water always flows downward, carrying with it the debris of destroyed civilizations. Every river valley that experienced megaflooding contains layers of sediment that chronicle the destruction-mixed deposits of organic remains, building materials, metal artifacts, and human skeletal remains all jumbled together in the chaotic testament to sudden catastrophe. These deposits often contain artifacts and materials that don't fit conventional archaeological timelines. Sophisticated metalwork attributed to primitive cultures, advanced ceramics found below supposedly earlier layers, and organic materials that carbon date to periods when official history claims the regions were uninhabited. Mountains tell the truth because they reveal the maximum extent of floodwaters through the marine fossils, deep-sea sediments, and oceanic debris they preserve at elevations far above current sea level. In the Himalayas, marine fossils appear at elevations exceeding 25,000 feet, evidence not of gradual geological uplift over millions of years, but of oceanic inundation so massive it temporarily covered even the highest mountains. Similar marine deposits appear in mountain ranges across the former Tartarian territories, suggesting coordinated global flooding on a scale that would obliterate any trace of surface civilization. The speed and thoroughness of flood destruction explains why archaeological evidence of advanced pre-catastrophe civilizations remains so difficult to find and accept. Unlike the gradual abandonment typical of civilizational decline, which leaves stratified layers of cultural remains showing adaptation and change over time, catastrophic flood destruction creates instant archaeological sites with no transitional layers. The sophistication of buried remains appears suddenly, fully developed, with no obvious antecedents, a pattern that challenges evolutionary models of cultural development and suggests instead the preservation of knowledge systems that originated in earlier, more advanced periods. Modern hydrogeological modelling confirms that floods of the scale indicated by younger Dryas geological evidence would have been capable of moving structures weighing thousands of tons across continental distances. The largest megalithic blocks known to archaeology, weights that challenge modern transportation capabilities, would have been swept along like pebbles in the current. Only structures built with specific flood-resistant design features, or those fortunate enough to be positioned in the rare areas protected by topographic barriers, would have survived such inundation. The selectivity of flood destruction creates a preservation bias that systematically eliminates evidence of technological sophistication while preserving only the most massive and simply constructed remains. Floodwaters carry away metals, ceramics, organic materials, and finely worked stone, while leaving behind only the largest blocks and most basic structural elements. This creates an archaeological record that systematically underestimates the technological capabilities of pre-flood civilizations, making sophisticated societies appear primitive and advanced engineering appear coincidental. The archaeological record of rapid sedimentation tells stories that conventional geology struggles to explain. Where mainstream timeline models predict gradual accumulation of sediment layers over thousands of years, physical evidence reveals instead the signature of instantaneous burial organic materials preserved with startling completeness, artificial structures showing no signs of weathering before burial, and stratigraphic sequences that violate the principle of gradual deposition. Consider the preservation paradox that appears consistently in flood-deposited archaeological sites. Delicate organic materials survive perfectly alongside sophisticated stone and metalwork, suggesting burial so rapid that normal decay processes were halted immediately. In Siberian permafrost sites, archaeologists have discovered wooden structures preserved with such completeness that tool marks remain visible on construction timbers. Yet these same sites contain evidence of massive flood deposition that should have destroyed any organic materials through abrasion and chemical action. The mechanism of rapid burial explains this paradoxical preservation. When megafloods carry massive loads of fine sediment, silt, clay, and organic debris, they can entomb structures and artifacts in oxygen-free environments within hours of initial inundation. The sediment acts as both preservative and time capsule, halting bacterial decay, preventing chemical corrosion, and maintaining the precise spatial relationships between artifacts that provide crucial archaeological context. Modern examples of rapid burial demonstrate how quickly sophisticated infrastructure can be completely hidden from surface observation. The 1980 eruption of Mount St. Helens buried an area larger than Chicago under sediment layers ranging from a few feet to over 600 feet deep. Within hours, a landscape containing roads, buildings, and industrial infrastructure had been transformed into an apparently pristine wilderness. Structures that had taken decades to construct were completely erased from visual detection, yet remained perfectly preserved beneath the deposits. The Mount St. Helens example provides a template for understanding how advanced civilizations could disappear so completely from surface observation while remaining archaeologically intact at depth. The key factor is the speed of burial. Gradual sedimentation allows weathering and decay to destroy artificial structures, while rapid burial preserves them indefinitely. The younger Dryas megafloods would have carried sediment loads thousands of times greater than the Mount St. Helens eruption, creating burial depths that would hide even the largest human constructions from casual discovery. Archaeological excavations in flood-deposited sediment layers reveal evidence of construction techniques and material sophistication that challenge conventional technological timelines. In layers attributed to supposedly primitive populations, archaeologists discover advanced metallurgy, precision stone cutting, and architectural elements that require mathematical understanding not officially developed until much later periods. The rapid burial preserved these technical achievements intact, preventing the gradual decay and material recycling that would normally eliminate evidence of advanced capabilities. The role of mud in creating instant archaeology extends beyond simple preservation to include the creation of detailed spatial records. When floodwaters carry heavy loads of fine sediment, they fill every cavity, wrap around every object, and create perfect molds of three-dimensional relationships. This process preserves not just individual artifacts but entire spatial contexts, the arrangement of furniture within rooms, the positioning of tools within workshops, the layout of streets and buildings within entire districts. Ground-penetrating radar surveys of deeply buried sites reveal this spatial preservation with startling clarity. Buried cities appear in complete detail, with street grids, building foundations, and even individual room divisions clearly visible in radar returns. The preservation is so complete that archaeologists can create detailed maps of buried urban areas without excavating a single square foot of surface area. These buried urban complexes often show planning and organizational sophistication that exceeds officially attributed capabilities of their supposed builders. The stratigraphy of rapid sedimentation creates distinctive signatures that differ markedly from gradual accumulation patterns. Instead of the clearly defined horizontal layers typical of slow deposition, rapid burial events create chaotic mixed layers containing materials from vastly different sources and time periods. Building stones appear mixed with deep-sea sediments. Domestic artifacts are found alongside marine fossils, and organic materials from different climatic zones are preserved together in jumbled deposits that chronicle the violence of their deposition. These chaotic stratigraphy signatures appear consistently in archaeological sites across the former territories of Tartaria, suggesting synchronized rapid burial events across continental distances. The material mixing patterns indicate not localized flooding, but coordinated inundation that picked up materials from oceanic, montane, and terrestrial sources simultaneously. Only events of global scale, such as cosmic impact-generated tsunamis combined with glacial lake failures, could produce such synchronized chaos across such vast geographic areas. Carbon dating of organic materials from rapidly buried sites often yields results that challenge conventional archaeological chronologies. Materials from supposedly different time periods appear in the same stratigraphic contexts, suggesting that conventional timelines may be compressed by orders of magnitude. Wood samples from buried structures often carbon date to periods thousands of years earlier than the civilizations to which they are attributed, indicating either dating methodology errors or the preservation of much more ancient construction than officially acknowledged. The preservation capabilities of rapid sediment burial extend to materials and technologies that would normally decay beyond recognition within centuries of abandonment. Textiles, leather goods, wooden machinery, and even paper documents have been recovered from deeply buried sites with sufficient preservation to allow detailed technological analysis. This preserved material culture reveals manufacturing capabilities and design sophistication that challenge assumptions about the technological limitations of pre-modern civilizations. Analysis of rapidly buried archaeological sites reveals construction techniques that would be challenging to replicate with modern equipment. Precision stone fitting that requires no mortar yet maintains structural integrity through seismic events. Metal alloys that show no signs of corrosion after centuries or millennia of burial, and wooden construction that demonstrates advanced understanding of stress distribution and load-bearing engineering. These technical capabilities appear suddenly in the archaeological record, fully developed, with no obvious antecedents or developmental sequences. Beneath the cities we inhabit today lie networks of tunnels, chambers, and constructed spaces that predate official construction timelines by centuries or millennia. These underground complexes display engineering sophistication that challenges conventional histories of technological development, and their existence raises uncomfortable questions about the true age and origins of human urban civilization. The phenomenon extends globally across territories once mapped as Tartaria. In Moscow, construction workers regularly encounter tunnel systems and underground chambers that official histories cannot adequately explain. The tunnels are constructed with precision stone-cutting techniques, feature sophisticated drainage systems, and extend for miles beneath the modern city. Official explanations attribute them to various historical periods: medieval defensive works, 19th century infrastructure projects, Soviet-era construction. But the architectural consistency and engineering sophistication suggest coordinated construction by a single organizing authority with capabilities that exceed those officially attributed to any of these periods. Similar underground complexes appear beneath major cities across Central Asia, Siberia, and Eastern Europe. In Istanbul, the Byzantine cisterns represent only the most accessible portion of underground infrastructure that extends far beyond the documented boundaries of any historical construction project. Ground-penetrating radar reveals tunnel networks connecting distant parts of the city through underground passages that would have required decades of coordinated excavation using sophisticated surveying and engineering techniques. The engineering sophistication of these underground complexes suggests construction capabilities that challenge official technological timelines. The tunnels maintain precise grades for drainage across distances of many miles, indicating advanced surveying and mathematical capabilities. Structural engineering shows understanding of load distribution, seismic stability, and long-term material durability that supposedly wasn't developed until much later historical periods. The coordination required to construct tunnel networks spanning continental distances would have required communication and organizational capabilities that official history attributes to no pre-modern civilization in these regions. The preservation advantages of underground construction explain why subsurface architecture survives while surface structures disappear. Underground spaces are protected from the weathering effects of temperature variation, precipitation, and atmospheric corrosion. They are shielded from the destructive forces of floods, earthquakes, and human conflict. Most significantly, they are hidden from the systematic destruction and material recycling that eliminates surface evidence of earlier civilizations. Flood destruction actually enhances the preservation of underground infrastructure by burying access points and creating protective layers of sediment that prevent further damage. While surface structures are swept away by floodwaters, underground chambers fill with sediment that acts as preservative, maintaining structural integrity and preventing collapse. This creates a systematic bias in archaeological preservation that favors underground remains over surface construction, potentially explaining why evidence of advanced pre-flood civilizations appears primarily in subsurface contexts. The scale of ancient drainage and water management systems reveals engineering capabilities that supposedly didn't exist in the regions and time periods to which they are attributed. Beneath Paris, the ancient quarries and catacombs connect to drainage systems that show mathematical precision in their construction. The grade calculations required to maintain proper water flow across such distances would have required surveying techniques and mathematical understanding that official history places much later in technological development. In Central Asian cities, underground water management systems called qanats extend for hundreds of miles, bringing water from mountain sources to urban areas through underground channels that maintain precise gradients across vast distances and varied topography. The construction of these systems would have required coordinated surveying across hundreds of miles, mathematical calculation of water flow rates, and organizational capabilities to coordinate labor across territorial boundaries. Yet these systems are attributed to local populations with supposedly limited technological and organizational capabilities. The infrastructure suggests continent-spanning coordination that challenges conventional understanding of pre-modern organizational capabilities. Tunnel systems in widely separated cities show identical construction techniques, identical architectural proportions, and identical engineering solutions to similar problems. The consistency across vast distances implies not independent development by isolated populations, but coordinated construction following standardized specifications developed by a centralized authority with continent-wide reach. Underground chambers beneath major cities often contain architectural elements that seem designed for purposes that don't align with official explanations of their construction. Chamber sizes and proportions suggest uses requiring large gatherings, sophisticated lighting systems, and acoustic properties that imply advanced understanding of sound engineering. Drainage systems seem designed for water volumes far exceeding any documented usage patterns. Storage chambers show capacity for materials on scales that would support populations much larger than historical records suggest inhabited these regions. The acoustic properties of certain underground chambers demonstrate mathematical understanding of sound that wouldn't be codified in European architectural theory for centuries after their supposed construction. Chambers that focus sound with precision, eliminate echoes, or amplify specific frequency ranges require sophisticated understanding of acoustic engineering and mathematical calculation of reflection patterns. These capabilities appear in underground construction attributed to periods and populations with supposedly limited mathematical and engineering knowledge. Modern archaeological techniques reveal the true extent of underground construction that has been systematically ignored or misattributed by conventional archaeology. Ground-penetrating radar, seismic tomography, and electrical resistance surveys show vast networks of constructed underground spaces extending far beyond the boundaries of any officially acknowledged construction projects. The scope of these underground complexes suggests not isolated construction projects, but coordinated underground urban development spanning continental distances. The systematic nature of underground infrastructure preservation creates an archaeological record that may be more complete and accurate than surface remains in revealing the true technological capabilities of pre-catastrophe civilizations. While surface construction succumbs to weather, warfare, and material recycling, underground complexes remain frozen in time, preserving not just individual structures, but entire spatial relationships and technological systems. If Tartaria was indeed a sophisticated pre-catastrophe civilization whose surface infrastructure was destroyed by younger Dryas floods, then the underground networks that survive beneath modern cities may represent the most complete archaeological record of advanced pre-flood human technological capabilities. These hidden complexes preserve evidence not just of individual technical achievements, but of the organizational and engineering sophistication required to coordinate construction projects across continental distances, capabilities that challenge fundamental assumptions about the development of human civilization and the permanence of technological achievement. The underground networks we have traced beneath the cities of the former Tartarian territories were not merely tunnels and storage chambers. They were infrastructure, and infrastructure implies technology. Stand in the basement of any modern building and observe the complexity of systems required to maintain contemporary urban life. electrical conduits, water pipes, communication cables, heating and cooling systems, all carefully coordinated to deliver energy and services throughout the structure above. Now consider what technological systems would be required to construct and maintain underground complexes spanning continental distances, connecting cities separated by thousands of miles, and functioning for centuries without modern maintenance equipment. The architectural features of surviving Tartarian buildings contain anomalies that suggest power distribution systems far more sophisticated than conventional history attributes to their supposed construction periods. Examine the metal frameworks that appear in structures attributed to the 19th century, and you'll find conductivity patterns that serve no obvious structural purpose. Copper and iron elements are arranged in configurations that resemble electrical distribution networks, yet they predate the official development of urban electrical systems by decades. The metal elements are not decorative additions but integral structural components, suggesting that electrical conductivity was a primary design consideration rather than an afterthought. The curious electrical properties of certain ancient structures extend far beyond simple metal frameworks. Ground-penetrating radar reveals that many megalithic sites contain extensive networks of metallic elements buried beneath and within their stone construction. These metal networks show patterns consistent with electromagnetic field generation and distribution, yet they appear in structures supposedly built by populations with no knowledge of electrical phenomena. The Pyramid of Giza contains shafts and chambers lined with materials that demonstrate measurable electrical conductivity, and recent research has detected electromagnetic anomalies that suggest the structure may have functioned as a type of electrical generator or distribution center. The phenomenon extends to Tartarian architecture across multiple continents. Buildings attributed to rapid 19th century construction contain architectural elements that serve no obvious purpose according to conventional building techniques. Metal spires and domes positioned at mathematically precise intervals, metallic frameworks that extend deep into building foundations, and ventilation systems that seem designed to channel airflow in patterns that would optimize electromagnetic field generation. These elements appear consistently in structures separated by thousands of miles, suggesting not independent architectural evolution, but implementation of standardized technological specifications. Free energy concepts that emerged in 19th century scientific research may represent rediscovery rather than initial development of electromagnetic technologies. Nikola Tesla's experiments with wireless power transmission, which demonstrated the possibility of distributing electrical energy through atmospheric and terrestrial conductivity rather than physical cables, were conducted during precisely the same period when Tartarian architecture was being systematically attributed to conventional construction methods. Tesla's own notebooks contain references to ancient electromagnetic technologies and suggest that his innovations were based on principles derived from much earlier sources. The systematic suppression of Tesla's free energy research, which was classified and removed from public access immediately after his death, follows patterns consistent with the deliberate concealment of advanced technologies that might reveal the true capabilities of earlier civilizations. Tesla's work demonstrated that electrical energy could be transmitted wirelessly across continental distances using the natural electromagnetic properties of the Earth itself, a capability that would explain how continent-spanning infrastructure could function without visible power distribution networks. Why would certain technologies disappear from the historical record rather than develop gradually through conventional innovation processes? The answer lies in the vulnerability of complex technological systems to catastrophic disruption. Advanced energy systems require not only sophisticated theoretical understanding, but also complex manufacturing capabilities, specialized materials, and coordinated maintenance networks. When cosmic catastrophe destroys the industrial infrastructure and eliminates the technical specialists required to maintain such systems, the technologies themselves become not just useless, but dangerous. Survivors facing immediate survival challenges have no resources to maintain systems they can no longer understand or control. The relationship between Tartarian architecture and electromagnetic phenomena becomes more significant when viewed through the lens of Earth's own electromagnetic properties. The planet functions as a massive electromagnetic generator, with the interaction between its magnetic field and solar radiation creating measurable electrical potentials that can be accessed and utilized by appropriately designed structures. Buildings positioned at specific geographic locations and constructed with proper materials and proportions could theoretically tap into these natural electromagnetic systems to generate and distribute power without conventional fuel sources. Archaeological analysis of Tartarian building locations reveals patterns consistent with deliberate positioning to optimize electromagnetic field access. Structures are positioned along ley lines, geographic alignments that correspond to measurable electromagnetic anomalies in the Earth's magnetic field. The mathematical precision of these alignments, combined with the consistent architectural elements that would optimize electromagnetic conductivity, suggests that Tartarian architecture was designed specifically to interface with natural planetary energy systems. Modern attempts to replicate electromagnetic energy systems have been systematically discouraged through patent suppression, research funding limitations, and academic marginalization. Scientists who pursue research into wireless power transmission, zero-point energy, or other alternative energy technologies often find their careers terminated and their research classified or suppressed. This pattern of technological suppression serves to maintain dependence on centralized energy systems, while preventing recognition that alternative energy technologies were not only possible, but may have been implemented successfully by earlier civilizations. The implications extend beyond mere technological curiosity. If Tartarian civilization possessed energy technologies that enabled continent-spanning infrastructure without centralized fuel systems, then the catastrophic flooding that destroyed their surface cities would have also eliminated technological capabilities that might have prevented or mitigated such catastrophes. The loss of advanced energy systems would have left survivors not only without the power to rebuild their civilization, but without the technological tools to predict or prepare for future cosmic threats. The electromagnetic properties of Tartarian architecture suggest a civilization that had achieved technological integration with natural planetary systems rather than domination over them. Instead of burning fossil fuels or splitting atoms to generate power, they may have learned to harmonize their infrastructure with the Earth's own electromagnetic dynamics. This approach would have provided virtually unlimited energy while maintaining ecological balance, but it would also have made their technological systems completely dependent on stable planetary conditions. When cosmic impacts disrupted the Earth's electromagnetic field and massive floods destroyed the precisely positioned structures required to access planetary energy systems, Tartarian civilization would have lost not just their cities, but their entire technological foundation. The survivors would have faced the choice between attempting to preserve knowledge of energy systems they could no longer implement, or focusing on simpler technologies that could function without complex infrastructure. The archaeological evidence suggests they chose survival over preservation, leaving behind only the architectural fragments we struggle to understand today. Walk through any major city today and observe a construction site in progress. Note the complexity of machinery required to move materials, the precision of measurement tools needed to ensure structural integrity, the coordination of specialized trades required to complete even basic buildings. Now examine the megalithic structures attributed to populations supposedly working with hand tools, rope, and primitive lifting devices, and try to reconcile the precision and scale of their achievements with the technological limitations of their supposed methods. The precision stone cutting that appears in structures across the former Tartarian territories rivals modern laser techniques in accuracy and exceeds them in scale. At Pumapunku in Bolivia, andesite blocks weighing up to 130 tons have been cut and fitted together with tolerances measured in fractions of millimeters. The surfaces are so smooth they appear polished, yet andesite is one of the hardest stones on Earth, requiring diamond-tipped tools to cut with precision using modern techniques. The mathematical accuracy of the cut's perfect right angles, complex interlocking shapes, surfaces flat to within microscopic tolerances, exceeds the capabilities of any cutting techniques officially available to the civilizations attributed with their construction. Similar precision appears in megalithic sites across multiple continents, always in locations that correspond to former Tartarian territories or their spheres of influence. The granite blocks of the Osirian in Egypt, the basalt structures of Baalbek in Lebanon, the volcanic stone constructions of Easter Island, all display cutting techniques that challenge conventional archaeological timelines. The consistency of precision across vast distances and supposedly different time periods suggests not independent development of similar techniques, but implementation of standardized technologies by a civilization with global reach. The transportation of massive blocks across impossible terrain presents puzzles that conventional archaeology cannot adequately address. The trilithon blocks at Baalbek weigh over 800 tons each, and were transported from quarries several miles away through mountainous terrain that would challenge modern heavy transport equipment. The Moai statues of Easter Island, weighing up to 80 tons, were somehow moved from inland quarries to coastal positions across terrain that would require specialized road construction to support such weights using conventional transport methods. Recent experimental attempts to replicate these transportation achievements using historically available techniques have failed to approach the scale and precision of the original accomplishments. Teams of hundreds of people using ropes, rollers, and ramps can move blocks weighing several tons across short distances on prepared surfaces, but cannot approach the scale of transportation evidenced at megalithic sites. The mathematical calculations required to design transport systems for 800-ton blocks would have required engineering knowledge supposedly not developed until the modern era. The acoustic properties of megalithic structures reveal another dimension of technological sophistication that challenges conventional construction histories. Chambers within the Great Pyramid demonstrate acoustic focusing that concentrates sound waves with mathematical precision. The stone circles of Stonehenge create standing wave patterns that amplify specific frequencies while eliminating others. Similar acoustic engineering appears at megalithic sites across the globe, suggesting understanding of sound wave mathematics that wasn't officially codified until the 19th century. These acoustic properties are not incidental byproducts of construction, but deliberate design features that require sophisticated mathematical understanding to achieve. The chamber dimensions, stone densities, and surface textures all contribute to acoustic effects that could only result from intentional engineering. The consistency of acoustic principles across supposedly independent civilizations suggests not coincidental discovery, but application of standardized acoustic technologies by populations with advanced mathematical and engineering capabilities. Evidence of liquefied stone and advanced metallurgy appears throughout megalithic construction in forms that conventional geology cannot explain. Stone blocks show evidence of having been shaped while in liquid or semi-liquid form, with curves and angles that could not be achieved through cutting solid stone. The surfaces show flow patterns, tool marks that extend through multiple stone types simultaneously, and molecular bonding between different stone varieties that suggests fusion at high temperatures. Analysis of metal clamps and fasteners found in megalithic construction reveals alloy compositions and manufacturing techniques that supposedly weren't developed until much later historical periods. The metals show no signs of corrosion despite centuries or millennia of exposure to harsh environmental conditions, indicating metallurgical knowledge that exceeds modern capabilities in certain applications. The precision of metal fitting and the integration of metal and stone elements suggest manufacturing capabilities that combine multiple advanced technologies in coordinated production processes. Why were these construction techniques lost rather than developed gradually through conventional technological evolution? The answer lies in the infrastructure requirements for advanced construction technologies. Precision stone cutting requires not just cutting tools but power sources to operate them, transportation systems to move massive materials, and organizational systems to coordinate complex projects. Liquefying stone requires understanding of chemistry and physics that depends on educational institutions and research facilities. Advanced metallurgy requires mining operations, smelting facilities, and quality control systems. When catastrophic events destroy the infrastructure that supports advanced technologies, the techniques themselves become impossible to implement even if theoretical knowledge survives. The loss of industrial facilities, power systems, transportation networks, and educational institutions creates technological bottlenecks that force regression to simpler methods that can be implemented with limited resources and basic tools. The loss of advanced construction techniques represents not forgetting, but inability to maintain the complex support systems required for their implementation. The archaeological evidence suggests that megalithic construction represents not primitive attempts at building, but sophisticated technologies that were implemented successfully for extended periods before being lost through catastrophic infrastructure destruction. The precision, scale, and consistency of these achievements indicate not gradual development of construction capabilities, but mature implementation of fully developed technologies by civilizations with advanced understanding of engineering, mathematics, and materials science. Modern attempts to reverse engineer megalithic construction techniques have yielded insights into possible methods, but have not successfully replicated the scale and precision of original achievements. Laser cutting can achieve similar precision on small scales, but cannot handle the massive blocks found at megalithic sites. Computer-controlled machinery can move heavy materials, but requires infrastructure and power sources that would not have been available to supposedly primitive populations. The gap between modern technological capabilities and megalithic achievements suggests that the original builders possessed technologies that we have not yet redeveloped, rather than primitive techniques that we have surpassed. The patterns that emerge from examining lost construction techniques, vanished energy systems, and buried infrastructure point to a phenomenon that challenges our fundamental assumptions about technological progress and civilizational development: the recurring reset of human knowledge. What we observe in the archaeological record is not steady progression from primitive to advanced, but cycles of technological achievement followed by catastrophic loss and partial recovery, a pattern that suggests human civilizational development follows cyclical rather than linear trajectories. Catastrophic events create technological bottlenecks that force the abandonment of complex knowledge systems, not because the information becomes incorrect, but because it becomes impossible to implement. Consider the difference between losing tools and losing understanding. When floodwaters destroy a carpenter's workshop, the tools are lost but the knowledge of their use remains. The carpenter can make new tools and resume work once materials become available. But when catastrophic events eliminate the entire industrial infrastructure that produces specialized tools, the knowledge of how to use those tools becomes irrelevant. The carpenter must revert to simpler techniques that can be implemented with available resources. The systematic suppression of advanced technological knowledge creates gaps in official historical records, but memory persists in forms that institutional control cannot easily reach. Embedded in the oral traditions of indigenous peoples worldwide, preserved in the sacred stories passed from generation to generation, and encoded in the ritual practices that have survived thousands of years of cultural disruption, lies testimony to events that match with startling precision the geological evidence of cosmic catastrophe and civilizational collapse. Listen to the creation stories of the Hopi people, and you hear not vague mythological metaphors but technical descriptions of cosmic bombardment. They speak of the time when fire rained from the sky and the earth shook, when the stars fell like rain and the world burned, when the great waters came from all directions and covered the land. These are not poetic abstractions, but specific, detailed accounts of the sequential effects of cosmic impact, atmospheric ignition, seismic disruption, and catastrophic flooding. The Hopi describe 4 previous worlds, each destroyed by cosmic catastrophe, with survivors emerging from underground refuges to rebuild human civilization in simplified form. The precision of these accounts becomes more significant when compared to similar traditions preserved by indigenous cultures across the globe who had no historical contact with each other. Australian Aboriginal Dreamtime stories describe the burning sky the falling stars, and the great waters that reshaped the continent. The specificity of astronomical details, descriptions of celestial objects breaking apart, of multiple impacts spread across time, of the relationship between cosmic events and terrestrial flooding, suggests direct observational experience rather than mythological invention. Pacific Islander traditions preserve accounts of advanced civilizations that were destroyed when fire came from the sky and the land sank beneath the waves. These stories describe not primitive hunter-gatherer societies but sophisticated urban cultures with advanced navigation, astronomy, and engineering capabilities. The survivors, according to these traditions, were forced to abandon their technological achievements and adapt to island environments using simplified technologies that could be maintained by small populations. The archaeological evidence from Pacific Islands supports these oral histories, revealing megalithic construction and advanced agricultural systems that predate official estimates of Pacific colonization by millennia. Native American traditions across multiple tribes preserve remarkably consistent accounts of the destruction of advanced civilizations by cosmic catastrophe. The Cherokee speak of the Nightland people, who possessed great cities and advanced technologies before the Skyfire destroyed their world. The Lakota describe the Star people, whose civilization was ended when the celestial beings brought destruction from above. The specificity of these accounts' descriptions of urban centers, transportation systems, and energy technologies matches the archaeological evidence of sophisticated pre-Columbian civilizations whose capabilities exceeded official estimates of Native American technological development. The mathematical precision embedded in indigenous astronomical traditions provides additional evidence of inheritance from more advanced civilizations. The Mayan long count calendar tracks cosmic cycles with accuracy that requires centuries of systematic observation and mathematical calculation. The precision of their astronomical predictions, the sophistication of their mathematical concepts, and the complexity of their calendar systems all suggest inheritance from cultures with extended periods of advanced educational and observational capabilities. Similar mathematical and astronomical precision appears in indigenous traditions across the former territories of Tartaria. Siberian shamanic traditions contain detailed astronomical knowledge that enables prediction of celestial events with accuracy that rivals modern calculations. The preservation of this knowledge through oral tradition suggests not primitive stargazing, but inheritance of sophisticated astronomical systems developed by cultures with advanced educational institutions and systematic observational programs. The consistency of catastrophic accounts across isolated cultures becomes particularly significant when examined for technical accuracy. Indigenous traditions describe the sequential effects of cosmic bombardment in the correct order: atmospheric ignition, ground impact, seismic disruption, climate change, and flooding. They describe the appearance of the sky during bombardment events, the behavior of atmospheric phenomena during impact, and the long-term environmental consequences of cosmic catastrophe. This technical accuracy suggests eyewitness testimony preserved through oral tradition, rather than mythological speculation about natural phenomena. The role of underground refugees in catastrophic survival appears consistently in indigenous traditions worldwide. The Hopi describe emergence from underground chambers after the destruction of previous worlds. Australian Aboriginal traditions speak of shelter in cave systems during the burning sky. Native American accounts describe survival in underground spaces during cosmic catastrophe. These stories provide specific technical details about underground construction, ventilation systems, food storage, and population organization that suggest practical knowledge of catastrophic survival techniques rather than mythological speculation. Indigenous traditions also preserve accounts of the technological regression that followed catastrophic events. They describe the loss of advanced capabilities, the abandonment of complex urban centers, and the adaptation to simplified technologies that could be maintained without sophisticated infrastructure. These accounts provide psychological insights into the survivor mentality that chooses immediate survival over preservation of advanced knowledge, explaining why technological capabilities disappeared so completely from post-catastrophe archaeological records. The systematic marginalization of indigenous oral traditions by academic institutions serves the same function as the suppression of technological regression research. It prevents recognition of cyclical civilizational development and catastrophic reset. Dismissing oral histories as mythology or folklore allows academic institutions to maintain linear progress narratives while avoiding uncomfortable questions about civilizational vulnerability and technological impermanence. Modern attempts to verify indigenous astronomical and geographical knowledge have repeatedly confirmed the accuracy of information preserved through oral tradition. Indigenous navigation techniques that seemed impossible to early European explorers have been validated by satellite technology and modern mapping. Astronomical predictions embedded in indigenous ceremonies have been confirmed by modern calculations. The technical accuracy of information preserved through supposedly primitive oral traditions challenges assumptions about the reliability of indigenous knowledge systems and suggests that these traditions may preserve accurate accounts of advanced civilizations and catastrophic events. The implications extend beyond historical curiosity to practical concerns about catastrophic preparation and technological preservation. Indigenous traditions contain detailed knowledge about recognizing cosmic threats, preparing for catastrophic events, and maintaining essential knowledge through civilizational collapse. This practical wisdom, preserved through thousands of years of cultural transmission, may be more relevant to current civilizational challenges than the official histories that systematically exclude such knowledge from serious consideration. Indigenous accounts of advanced pre-catastrophe civilizations often include descriptions of technological capabilities that match the archaeological evidence of sophisticated ancient construction and engineering. They describe energy systems that functioned without visible fuel sources, transportation methods that could move massive materials across great distances, and communication systems that connected far-flung populations. These technological descriptions, preserved in oral tradition, provide interpretive frameworks for understanding the archaeological anomalies that conventional history cannot adequately explain. The preservation of catastrophic memory in indigenous traditions serves as testimony not just to past events, but to the importance of maintaining cultural knowledge systems that can survive civilizational collapse. While written records and electronic information systems are vulnerable to destruction by catastrophic events, oral traditions maintained through human memory and cultural practice can preserve essential knowledge across multiple cycles of civilizational rise and fall. If the Younger Dryas catastrophe did indeed destroy an advanced civilization that cartographers later called Tartaria, then indigenous oral traditions may preserve the most complete and accurate accounts of what was lost and how the survivors adapted to catastrophically reduced circumstances. These traditions provide not just historical testimony, but practical guidance for populations that may face similar challenges in the future, when cosmic forces again reshape the conditions of human existence on Earth. While oral traditions preserve the memory of catastrophe in human consciousness, the stones themselves bear witness to the violence of the waters that reshaped our world. Stand before any ancient structure and learn to read the signatures that floods leave behind, the scour marks, the sediment lines, the evidence of waters that rose far beyond any recorded historical levels. The architecture that survived the Great Catastrophe tells stories that written records never could, preserving in their very foundations the testimony of civilizations that faced cosmic disaster and built for permanence in a world they knew could change overnight. The most revealing evidence appears in structures that official archaeology attributes to much later periods than their flood damage suggests. Examine the base courses of medieval European cathedrals, and you'll find stones that show unmistakable signs of prolonged submersion in fast-moving water. The scour patterns, the differential erosion, and the sediment deposits embedded in lower masonry courses indicate flooding far more severe than any documented historical events. These are not the marks of seasonal river flooding or even catastrophic storms, but evidence of inundation so complete and violent that it challenges fundamental assumptions about the stability of European civilization over the past millennium. The phenomenon extends across the former territories of Tartaria with disturbing consistency. In Siberian cities, buildings attributed to 19th century Russian construction show flood damage that predates their supposed construction by centuries. The watermarks appear not just on ground-level structures but on buildings supposedly constructed on elevated ground that should have been safe from any possible flood events. The height of these flood indicators suggests water levels that would have required oceanic displacement events far exceeding any floods documented in written history. Structures partially buried that extend much deeper underground reveal the true scale of post-catastrophe sedimentation. What appears at surface level as a single-story building often proves, when excavated, to be merely the uppermost floor of much larger complexes. The Istanbul underground cisterns, officially attributed to Byzantine construction, extend far deeper than any documented excavation has revealed. Ground-penetrating radar shows multiple levels of sophisticated architecture descending hundreds of feet below the lowest, officially acknowledged chambers. Similar patterns appear throughout Central Asia and Siberia, where structures attributed to various historical periods prove to be only the topmost portions of much larger architectural complexes. The buried portions often show superior construction techniques, more sophisticated engineering, and architectural elements that predate the supposed construction periods by centuries or millennia. The differential preservation between surface and subsurface construction suggests that the buried portions represent original construction, while surface modifications represent later adaptations by populations with reduced technological capabilities. The telltale signs of rapid sediment deposition appear consistently on ancient walls throughout the former Tartarian territories. Unlike the gradual accumulation patterns typical of normal geological processes, these deposits show the chaotic layering characteristic of catastrophic flood events. Multiple sediment types, marine clays, terrestrial silts, organic debris, and crystalline materials that could only originate from cosmic impact appear mixed together in layers that could only have been deposited simultaneously by waters carrying materials from vastly different sources. Analysis of sediment composition reveals the global scale of the flooding events. Marine fossils appear in flood deposits hundreds of miles from any ocean, mixed with materials from Arctic regions, temperate forests, and desert environments. This mixing pattern indicates not localized flooding, but coordinated global inundation that picked up materials from multiple climate zones and deposited them together in chaotic layers that chronicle the violence of planetary-scale catastrophe. Why does the grandest architecture survive when everything else perishes? The answer lies in the physics of flood destruction and the intentional design choices of civilizations that understood catastrophic risk. Massive stone construction, properly designed and positioned, can withstand flood forces that would obliterate lighter structures. The builders of megalithic architecture across the globe demonstrated sophisticated understanding of hydraulic engineering, positioning their most important structures at elevations and orientations that would maximize survival chances during catastrophic flooding. The mathematical precision of megalithic positioning becomes more significant when viewed through the lens of flood survival. Structures are positioned not just for astronomical alignment or aesthetic effect, but for maximum protection from the directional flows that massive floods would create. The angles of construction, the heights of foundations, and the drainage systems integrated into megalithic sites all suggest engineering designed specifically to survive the kinds of catastrophic water events that the geological record shows occurred repeatedly throughout human history. Reading flood marks in megalithic construction reveals engineering sophistication that challenges conventional archaeological timelines. The builders incorporated water management features that seem absurdly over-engineered for normal precipitation or seasonal flooding, but prove perfectly appropriate for surviving oceanic displacement events. Drainage channels capable of handling water flows that would require modern pumping stations to manage. Foundation systems designed to remain stable when undermined by fast-moving water, and structural elements that could withstand hydraulic pressures that would collapse conventional buildings. The survival bias in architectural preservation creates an archaeological record that systematically overrepresents the most massive and sophisticated ancient construction, while eliminating evidence of lighter, more typical structures. What survives massive flooding is not necessarily representative of average construction capabilities, but rather the most advanced engineering achievements of pre-catastrophe civilizations. This preservation bias may explain why ancient architecture often seems impossibly sophisticated for its supposed construction period. What we observe are not typical buildings, but the most advanced engineering projects, designed specifically to survive catastrophic events. The architectural witnesses extend beyond individual buildings to urban planning that demonstrates sophisticated understanding of catastrophic flood management. Ancient cities positioned on elevated ground, with drainage systems capable of handling water volumes that exceed any modern urban infrastructure, and with street layouts that would channel floodwaters away from critical structures. The urban planning sophistication suggests not gradual development through trial and error, but implementation of engineering knowledge developed through experience with previous catastrophic events. Modern analysis of flood-damaged ancient architecture reveals construction techniques that specifically address the challenges of building in catastrophically unstable environments. Foundation systems that could remain stable during seismic events, joint designs that could flex without failing during ground movement, and material choices that could withstand prolonged submersion without structural degradation. These are not techniques developed for normal construction challenges, but specialized engineering solutions for extreme survival scenarios. The consistent appearance of flood survival engineering across supposedly independent ancient civilizations suggests not coincidental innovation, but application of standardized knowledge systems developed by populations with extensive experience managing catastrophic environmental change. The techniques appear fully developed, without obvious experimental antecedents, implying inheritance from earlier periods when such engineering knowledge was essential for survival. If Tartarian civilization was indeed destroyed by the catastrophic flooding that accompanied the younger Dryas impacts, then the architectural witnesses that survived provide testimony not just to the violence of the catastrophe, but to the technological sophistication of the civilization that experienced it. The flood survival engineering embedded in surviving structures suggests a population that understood catastrophic risk, and built with the expectation that cosmic disaster could reshape their world at any time. The most honest testimony comes from the rocks themselves. While human records can be altered, oral traditions can be dismissed as mythology, and architectural evidence can be reinterpreted, the geological record preserves in stone and sediment the unbiased chronicle of catastrophic events that reshaped our planet and obliterated the civilizations that existed when cosmic disaster struck. The Earth remembers what human records have forgotten, and that memory is written in languages that cannot lie. The crystalline structure of shocked minerals, the isotopic signatures of cosmic bombardment, and the fossilized remains of creatures that died in oceanic displacement events of planetary scale. Rock layers throughout the northern continents tell the story of instant destruction with precision that exceeds any human historical account. The younger Dryas boundary layer appears in geological cores from Greenland to Antarctica, from Siberia to South America, marking a moment 12,900 years ago, when normal geological processes were interrupted by events so violent they left signatures that will remain readable for millions of years. Above and below this boundary, rock layers show the patient accumulation typical of gradual natural processes. Within the boundary layer itself, chaos, materials that should never appear together, crystalline structures that require temperatures and pressures beyond terrestrial capability, and evidence of environmental conditions so extreme they challenge understanding of what Earth-based life could survive. The fossilized evidence of instantaneous climate change appears most dramatically in the preserved remains of creatures that died while engaged in normal life activities. Mammoth carcasses found in Siberian permafrost contain partially digested food in their stomach's temperate vegetation that should not have grown in Arctic climates, preserved in animals that froze so quickly that bacterial decomposition never began. The preservation is so complete that the animals appear to have died yesterday, yet carbon dating places their death at precisely the Younger Dryas boundary. This is not gradual climate adaptation or seasonal migration, but evidence of instantaneous environmental change so rapid that large animals had no time to respond. Similar patterns appear in marine fossil deposits that chronicle the sudden death of ocean ecosystems across global distances. Microscopic organisms that require specific temperature and salinity conditions appear fossilized in sediment layers that also contain evidence of cosmic bombardment, suggesting that oceanic displacement events killed marine life across entire ocean basins simultaneously. The scale of marine ecosystem collapse indicated by these fossil deposits exceeds anything in recorded human history and points to catastrophic disruption of global oceanic circulation patterns. The platinum anomaly appears as a metallic signature that cannot be explained by terrestrial geological processes. Platinum concentrations in Younger Dryas boundary layers spike to levels that exceed normal background readings by factors of hundreds or thousands. Platinum is rare in Earth's crust but abundant in asteroids and comets, making its appearance in geological layers a reliable indicator of cosmic bombardment. The global distribution of platinum spikes, appearing simultaneously in ice cores, sediment layers, and soil samples across multiple continents, provides unambiguous evidence of cosmic material raining down on Earth during the Younger Dryas period. Accompanying the platinum anomaly are cosmic impact signatures that read like a forensic analysis of planetary assault. Microscopic diamonds appear in sediment layers, nanodiamonds that can only be created under the extreme pressures generated by cosmic impact. Shocked quartz crystals show the distinctive fracture patterns that result from pressures far exceeding anything generated by terrestrial geological processes. Glaspherul's tiny beads of melted Earth material appear in concentrations that indicate widespread surface melting from cosmic impact or airburst events. The distribution pattern of impact signatures reveals the scope of the bombardment. Instead of single impact sites typical of isolated meteorite strikes, the evidence points to multiple impacts scattered across both American continents and extending into the Atlantic Ocean. The pattern suggests not a single large impactor, but a fragmented celestial object. Perhaps a comet broken apart by gravitational forces or previous impacts that delivered sustained bombardment over periods measured in decades rather than moments. Marine fossils found at impossible elevations provide perhaps the most dramatic evidence of oceanic displacement during the Younger Dryas catastrophe. Deep-sea creatures appear fossilized in mountain regions thousands of miles from the nearest ocean and thousands of feet above current sea level. These are not gradual evolutionary adaptations or tectonic uplift over geological time, but evidence of oceanic waters being displaced to elevations that would have temporarily submerged even the highest continental regions. The physics of oceanic displacement on this scale requires energy sources that exceed any terrestrial geological process. Only cosmic impact events, asteroids or comets striking ocean basins, could generate the kinetic energy needed to displace oceanic water masses to such elevations. The mathematical modeling of such events predicts exactly the kinds of marine fossil deposits found in continental interiors, providing confirmation that cosmic bombardment was indeed capable of generating global oceanic displacement events. Why does the Earth itself remember what human records have forgotten? The geological record operates on timescales that transcend human civilizational development. Rock layers preserve information for millions of years, immune to the social and political forces that shape human historical narratives. Geological processes record events with precision that exceeds human observational capabilities, preserving evidence of environmental conditions, atmospheric composition, and catastrophic events that no human witness could have survived to document. The reliability of geological testimony becomes crucial when evaluating claims about lost civilizations and catastrophic historical events. While human records are subject to revision, loss, and deliberate falsification, geological evidence preserves independently verifiable data that can be analyzed using multiple scientific techniques. The consistency of cosmic impact signatures across different types of geological evidence, ice cores, sediment layers, fossil deposits, and mineral formations provides confirmation that cannot be achieved through human historical sources alone. The implications of geological testimony extend beyond confirmation of catastrophic events to illumination of their civilizational consequences. The speed and violence of environmental change indicated by the geological record explains why sophisticated human societies could disappear so completely from historical memory. When cosmic bombardment can alter atmospheric composition in decades, shift climate zones in years, and displace oceanic water masses in hours, no human technology or social organization could provide adequate protection for complex civilizational infrastructure. The geological evidence also explains why recovery from such catastrophes would be slow and fragmented. Environmental conditions during and immediately after cosmic bombardment would have been too unstable to support complex agriculture, urban development, or technological manufacturing. Survivor populations would have faced not just the destruction of their immediate infrastructure, but the elimination of the stable environmental conditions that make complex civilization possible. Modern geological analysis techniques continue to reveal new evidence of Younger Dryas catastrophe, as researchers develop more sensitive methods for detecting cosmic impact signatures. Each new discovery confirms the global scale and devastating intensity of events that occurred precisely at the time when human civilization was supposedly making the transition from primitive hunter-gatherer societies to more complex agricultural communities. The geological testimony suggests instead that this transition may represent not initial development, but recovery from much more sophisticated civilizations that were destroyed by cosmic catastrophe. If the geological record preserves accurate testimony to the scope and violence of Younger Dryas catastrophe, then the implications for understanding human civilizational development become profound. The events recorded in rock and ice were capable of erasing not just individual settlements or regional cultures, but entire continental civilizations, leaving only the most massive architectural remains and fragmentary cultural memories preserved in oral traditions. The geological witnesses confirm that catastrophic reset of human technological achievement is not theoretical possibility, but documented historical fact one that could occur again when cosmic forces next intersect with human civilizational development. The geological record speaks with crystalline clarity about catastrophic events that reshaped our planet 12,900 years ago, yet this same evidence points to a disturbing question. How does an empire that spans continents, possesses advanced technology, and leaves architectural witnesses in stone simply vanish from human memory? The answer lies in understanding the fragility of information itself, how quickly the complex networks that preserve and transmit knowledge can collapse when the infrastructure supporting them faces catastrophic disruption. Consider the information systems that preserve our current civilization's knowledge. Libraries require buildings, climate control, and human maintenance to prevent deterioration. Digital archives need continuous electrical power, specialized hardware, and technical expertise to remain accessible. Academic institutions depend on economic systems, political stability, and social continuity to maintain their educational functions. Remove any of these supporting elements, and the entire knowledge preservation system begins to degrade exponentially. Now imagine all these systems facing simultaneous catastrophic disruption across global distances, and you begin to understand how even the most sophisticated civilizations can disappear so completely that their very existence becomes questionable. The vulnerability of centralized record-keeping becomes apparent when viewed through the lens of network theory. Complex civilizations concentrate their most important information in specialized centers, capitals, universities, libraries, religious institutions that serve as nodes in knowledge networks spanning vast territories. This centralization creates efficiency during stable periods, but catastrophic vulnerability during crisis. When cosmic bombardment destroys these information centers simultaneously across multiple continents, the entire knowledge network collapses instantly, leaving isolated survivors with fragmentary information and no means of accessing or reconstructing the complete knowledge systems their civilization had developed. Archaeological evidence suggests that Tartarian civilization exhibited exactly this kind of centralized information architecture. The consistent appearance of sophisticated architectural and engineering techniques across vast distances implies coordinated knowledge systems that could standardize complex technologies across continental territories. The mathematical precision required for such coordination would have necessitated educational institutions, technical manuals, and communication networks that could maintain consistency across thousands of miles and multiple generations of builders and engineers. When the Younger Dryas catastrophe struck, these centralized knowledge systems would have been among the first casualties. Urban centers housing libraries, schools, and technical specialists would have been primary targets for cosmic impact and subsequent flooding. The survivors, scattered across devastated landscapes, would have found themselves isolated from the institutional knowledge that had made their technological achievements possible. Even if individual specialists survived, they would lack the infrastructure, materials, and coordinated support systems necessary to implement or maintain complex technologies. Why do technological civilizations leave fewer archaeological traces than primitive societies? The answer contradicts common assumptions about durability and preservation. Advanced technologies often utilize materials and methods that are efficient and sophisticated, but not necessarily durable over geological timescales. Primitive societies build with stone, bone, and ceramics materials that survive for millennia in archaeological contexts. Technological societies use metals that corrode, alloys that decompose, polymers that degrade, and complex materials that revert to component elements when maintenance systems fail. The technological systems themselves create preservation challenges. Advanced civilizations recycle materials efficiently, reusing metals, repurposing building stones, and maintaining infrastructure through continuous renovation that eliminates evidence of original construction methods. Primitive societies abandon sites when they become untenable, leaving archaeological contexts intact. Technological societies modify, rebuild, and adapt continuously, destroying archaeological evidence of earlier phases in the process of maintaining current functionality. The role of survivors in reshaping historical narratives becomes crucial for understanding how civilizational memory is lost. Populations that survive catastrophic collapse face profound psychological pressures to forget rather than remember their pre-catastrophe conditions. The contrast between sophisticated technological capabilities and post-catastrophe survival conditions creates cognitive dissonance that can be resolved either by preserving painful memories of loss or by reconstructing narratives that minimize the scope of what was lost. Psychological research on trauma responses shows that populations consistently choose cognitive strategies that support survival and adaptation rather than accurate historical memory. Survivors of civilizational collapse would face powerful incentives to develop new cultural narratives that emphasize their ability to rebuild and adapt rather than dwelling on the magnitude of their losses. These revised narratives serve essential psychological functions but systematically eliminate evidence of pre-catastrophe technological achievements. The process of narrative revision accelerates across generations as direct memories of pre-catastrophe conditions fade. Children born into post-catastrophe conditions have no personal experience of advanced technological capabilities, making the survival-adapted narratives of their parents seem naturally accurate rather than psychologically necessary distortions. Within a few generations, cultural narratives that began as psychological coping mechanisms become accepted historical traditions that bear little resemblance to actual pre-catastrophe conditions. When forgetting becomes survival, the mechanics of historical amnesia shift from accidental loss to active suppression. Maintaining memories of advanced pre-catastrophe capabilities would be not just psychologically painful, but practically counterproductive for populations adapting to radically reduced circumstances. Technical knowledge that cannot be implemented becomes a source of frustration and social disruption. Cultural practices that require infrastructure and resources unavailable in post-catastrophe conditions become reminders of permanent loss rather than sources of cultural continuity. Archaeological evidence supports this pattern of deliberate forgetting. Post-Younger Dryas sites show not gradual technological decline but abrupt abandonment of complex techniques in favour of simpler methods that could be maintained with available resources. The transition appears not as failed attempts to preserve advanced capabilities, but a successful adaptation to changed circumstances through deliberate simplification. This suggests conscious choices by survivor populations to abandon technological complexity rather than failed efforts to maintain it. The speed with which complex information systems collapse explains why evidence of advanced pre-catastrophe civilizations appears so rarely in archaeological contexts. The window between catastrophic infrastructure loss and complete informational collapse may be measured in decades rather than centuries. Once specialized knowledge is lost and institutional systems fail, the technological capabilities that defined advanced civilizations become archaeologically invisible, preserved only in the most massive architectural remains that could survive both catastrophic destruction and subsequent material recycling. Modern examples of informational collapse provide templates for understanding ancient processes. The dissolution of the Soviet Union resulted in the loss of vast amounts of technical documentation and institutional knowledge within a single generation. Advanced aerospace and industrial technologies became inaccessible, not because the information was destroyed, but because the institutional systems required to maintain and transmit that knowledge were disrupted. Similar patterns appear after major wars, natural disasters, and economic collapses. Complex information systems prove far more fragile than the physical infrastructure they document and maintain. If Tartarian civilization possessed the advanced technological capabilities suggested by architectural and cartographic evidence, then the Younger Dryas catastrophe would have created exactly the conditions necessary for complete informational collapse. The centralized knowledge systems that enabled continent-spanning coordination would have been destroyed simultaneously across global distances. The survivors would have faced immediate survival challenges that made preservation of complex technical knowledge both practically impossible and psychologically counterproductive. Within a few generations, the mechanisms of historical amnesia would have erased not just specific technical knowledge, but memory of the technological sophistication that had characterized their destroyed civilization. Understanding these mechanics illuminates why archaeological evidence of advanced ancient civilizations remains so difficult to recognize and interpret. The processes that eliminate technological civilizations from historical memory are not random accidents, but systematic consequences of the relationship between information complexity and infrastructural stability. When that relationship is disrupted by catastrophic events, even the most sophisticated civilizations can disappear so completely that their very existence becomes a matter of speculation rather than documented fact. While the mechanisms of historical amnesia explain how advanced civilizations could disappear from immediate post-catastrophe memory, they cannot account for the systematic erasure of Tartarian evidence from European maps and historical records during the 18th and 19th centuries more than 10,000 years after the Younger Dryas catastrophe. This later erasure follows patterns that suggest not natural forgetting, but deliberate historical revision, implemented by institutions that found the existence of advanced pre-modern civilizations inconvenient to their political and academic agendas. The timing of Tartarian erasure from European cartography coincides precisely with the period of European colonial expansion and the development of modern academic disciplines. As European powers extended their territorial claims across precisely the regions where Tartarian civilization had been mapped, the continued existence of indigenous sophisticated political organization became legally and morally inconvenient. Colonial expansion was easier to justify when target territories could be characterized as sparsely populated wilderness inhabited by primitive peoples who would benefit from European civilization rather than sophisticated empires with legitimate claims to territorial sovereignty. Academic institutions played crucial roles in this process of historical revision. The establishment of universities and research centers in regions being incorporated into European colonial empires coincided with systematic correction of local historical traditions. Indigenous accounts of sophisticated urban civilizations, advanced technologies, and continent-spanning political organization were reinterpreted as mythological exaggerations, misunderstood natural phenomena, or evidence of primitive populations misremembering contact with more advanced cultures. The process followed consistent patterns across different regions and time periods. Local historians and traditional knowledge keepers found their accounts being edited, translated, and republished in forms that emphasized primitive simplicity over technological sophistication. Archaeological discoveries that contradicted colonial narratives of primitive indigenous populations were reinterpreted, attributed to later periods, or relegated to storage facilities where they would not interfere with established academic timelines. Evidence of systematic historical revision appears in the documentary record of academic institutions themselves. University archives contain correspondence discussing the correction of local historical accounts that contradicted European civilizational narratives. Research funding was systematically directed away from investigations that might support indigenous claims of advanced pre-contact civilizations. Academic careers were built on research that supported colonial narratives while being systematically destroyed for scholars who pursued alternative interpretations of archaeological and historical evidence. Who benefited from erasing evidence of advanced ancient civilizations? The answer reveals itself in the political and economic transformations that occurred during the same period as historical revision. European colonial powers found their territorial expansion simplified when target regions could be characterized as lacking sophisticated indigenous political organization. Emerging nation-states found their claims to cultural and technological superiority supported by narratives that portrayed pre-modern civilizations as primitive and backward compared to modern European achievements. The role of emerging nation-states in creating convenient histories extended beyond colonial justification to domestic political organization. The development of modern national identities required historical narratives that emphasized the uniqueness and superiority of specific cultural and ethnic groups. The existence of advanced pre-modern civilizations that transcended modern national boundaries would have complicated efforts to create distinct national identities based on claims of unique cultural achievement and technological innovation. Academic institutions became primary instruments for implementing and maintaining revised historical narratives. University curricula, textbook content, and research priorities were systematically aligned with political requirements for historical narratives that supported state policies and national identities. The control of acceptable narratives operated through multiple mechanisms that remain influential in contemporary academic institutions. Research funding was directed toward projects that supported established historical timelines while being systematically denied to investigations that might challenge conventional chronologies. Publication policies in academic journals favored papers that aligned with established interpretive frameworks, while rejecting submissions that proposed alternative historical possibilities. Career advancement in academic institutions became dependent on supporting rather than challenging established historical narratives. Scholars who pursued research into advanced ancient civilizations, alternative chronologies, or alternative interpretations of archaeological evidence found their academic positions threatened, their funding eliminated, and their professional reputations destroyed. The message was clear. Investigate within acceptable parameters or face professional elimination. Why are alternative histories marginalized rather than investigated? The answer lies in the relationship between historical narratives and institutional power. Academic institutions, government agencies, and cultural organizations have invested enormous resources in maintaining historical narratives that support their authority and legitimacy. Acknowledging that advanced civilizations existed before modern institutions were established would undermine claims that current institutions represent the pinnacle of human development and the natural result of progressive evolution. The systematic marginalization of alternative historical research creates self-perpetuating cycles that maintain established narratives regardless of contradictory evidence. Students are educated within frameworks that present conventional histories as established fact rather than interpretive conclusions based on limited evidence. Researchers who accept these frameworks pursue investigations that confirm rather than challenge established timelines. Institutions reward conformity to established narratives while punishing deviation from acceptable interpretive boundaries. Modern examples of historical revision demonstrate that these processes continue to operate in contemporary academic and political contexts. Archaeological discoveries that contradict established timelines are systematically reinterpreted rather than allowed to challenge fundamental assumptions about human civilizational development. Researchers who propose alternative chronologies or interpretations face professional ostracism, funding elimination, and systematic exclusion from academic institutions. The Internet age has created new mechanisms for historical revision and narrative control. Information that challenges established historical narratives can be systematically excluded from search results, marginalized through algorithm manipulation, or discredited through coordinated campaigns that portray alternative research as pseudo-scientific or conspiracy-oriented. The effect is to maintain public acceptance of established historical narratives while preventing serious examination of contradictory evidence. The deliberate rewriting of the past serves contemporary political and economic interests by maintaining narratives that support current institutional arrangements. Acknowledging that advanced civilizations existed before current institutions were established would raise uncomfortable questions about the permanence and superiority of current political, economic, and academic systems. The systematic erasure of evidence for sophisticated pre-modern civilizations maintains cultural narratives that justify current institutional authority and discourage investigation of alternative organizational possibilities. If Tartarian civilization was indeed an advanced pre-catastrophe empire that survived in fragmentary form until the modern era, then its systematic erasure from historical memory represents not just academic oversight, but deliberate institutional policy. The timing, methods, and beneficiaries of this erasure reveal coordinated efforts by political and academic institutions to maintain historical narratives that support their authority while eliminating evidence that challenges their claims to represent the pinnacle of human civilizational development. The systematic erasure of Tartarian evidence from official historical records would seem to have been successful, except for one inconvenient reality. The physical evidence refuses to disappear. Archaeological discoveries continue to emerge that contradict established timelines, challenge conventional interpretations of human civilizational development, and support the existence of advanced pre-modern technologies and organizational systems. The pattern that emerges is not random discovery and interpretation, but systematic rediscovery followed by immediate suppression, a cycle that reveals ongoing institutional commitment to maintaining historical narratives regardless of contradictory physical evidence. Archaeological finds that contradict established timelines appear with disturbing regularity in precisely the regions where Tartarian civilization had been documented by historical cartographers. In Siberia, construction projects regularly uncover sophisticated urban infrastructure that predates official estimates of regional development by centuries or millennia. The discoveries include precision stone cutting, advanced metallurgy, and architectural elements that require technological capabilities supposedly unavailable to the populations of these regions during the attributed time periods. The initial response to such discoveries typically follows predictable patterns. Local archaeologists and construction crews recognize the significance of unusual finds and report them through official channels. Preliminary investigations confirm the sophistication and age of discovered materials. Academic excitement builds as researchers recognize the potential implications of finds that could revolutionize understanding of regional and global historical development. Then the suppression begins. Research funding is mysteriously redirected to other projects. Academic permissions for continued excavation are delayed or denied through bureaucratic obstacles. Discovered materials are transferred to storage facilities where they become inaccessible to independent researchers. Publication of preliminary findings is discouraged or prevented through academic pressure. The researchers involved find their careers threatened if they continue to pursue investigations that challenge established historical timelines. The fate of researchers who challenge conventional chronology illuminates the institutional mechanisms that maintain historical narratives regardless of physical evidence. Academic careers built on decades of research and publication can be destroyed within months when scholars pursue investigations that contradict established historical frameworks. University positions are eliminated, research grants are cancelled, and professional reputations are systematically destroyed through coordinated campaigns that portray alternative research as academically unacceptable. The careers of individual researchers provide case studies in the suppression process. Dr. Virginia Steen McIntyre, a respected geologist, faced professional ostracism when her dating of Mexican archaeological sites suggested human presence in the Americas much earlier than conventionally accepted timelines. Her research was systematically excluded from academic publications, her university position was eliminated, and her professional reputation was destroyed despite the technical accuracy of her geological analysis methods. Similar patterns appear in the careers of researchers who have investigated evidence of advanced ancient technologies, alternative chronologies, or sophisticated pre-modern civilizations. Professional destruction is swift and thorough, serving as a warning to other researchers about the consequences of pursuing investigations that challenge established historical narratives. The message is clear: conform to acceptable interpretive boundaries or face professional elimination. Private collections and classified archaeological discoveries reveal the extent to which significant finds are systematically removed from public knowledge. Wealthy collectors and government agencies maintain extensive holdings of archaeological materials that contradict established historical timelines. These collections contain artifacts, architectural elements, and technological specimens that would revolutionize understanding of human civilizational development if they were subjected to public academic analysis. The Smithsonian Institution's storage facilities reportedly contain thousands of artifacts and specimens that contradict established archaeological timelines. Giant skeletal remains, advanced metallurgical specimens, and precision-crafted artifacts that predate supposed technological development by millennia are systematically excluded from public exhibition and academic research. Freedom of Information Act requests for access to these materials are routinely denied or heavily redacted, preventing independent analysis of potentially revolutionary archaeological evidence. Government agencies maintain classified archaeological programs that operate outside normal academic oversight. Military archaeological teams investigate sites of strategic importance, often removing significant finds before civilian archaeologists can examine them. The rationale for classification is typically national security, but the actual effect is to prevent discoveries that might challenge established historical narratives from reaching public or academic attention. The difference between public archaeology and hidden findings becomes more apparent as independent researchers develop techniques for detecting and analyzing archaeological sites without official permission. Ground-penetrating radar, satellite imaging, and other remote sensing technologies reveal the true extent of archaeological sites that official excavations have systematically avoided or minimally investigated. The discrepancies between publicly acknowledged finds and privately detected evidence suggest systematic institutional policy to limit public access to archaeological discoveries. Modern examples of technological suppression demonstrate that these patterns extend beyond historical archaeology to contemporary scientific and technological development. Patent offices routinely classify inventions related to energy technologies, propulsion systems, and other advanced applications under national security provisions that prevent public development or discussion. The effect is to maintain dependence on established technological systems while preventing recognition that alternative technologies are not only possible, but have been successfully developed. The suppression of alternative energy technologies follows patterns remarkably similar to archaeological suppression. Researchers who develop functional alternatives to conventional energy systems find their work classified, their funding eliminated, and their professional careers destroyed. The technologies themselves are acquired by government agencies or private corporations and removed from public development. The pattern suggests coordinated institutional commitment to maintaining current technological systems regardless of the availability of superior alternatives. Corporate suppression of technological innovation operates through patent acquisition and legal pressure rather than government classification. Advanced technologies that could disrupt established industrial systems are systematically purchased by major corporations and then suppressed rather than developed. The legal and financial resources available to major corporations make resistance by individual inventors virtually impossible. The Internet age has created new mechanisms for suppression that operate through information control rather than physical seizure. Alternative historical research and technological development can be marginalized through algorithm manipulation, search results suppression, and coordinated disinformation campaigns. The effect is to maintain public acceptance of established narratives while preventing serious examination of alternative possibilities. The pattern of rediscovery and suppression reveals institutional commitment to maintaining established historical and technological narratives that transcends changes in political systems, academic institutions, and technological capabilities. The mechanisms of suppression evolve with changing circumstances, but the underlying policy preventing public recognition of evidence that challenges established institutional authority remains consistent across time periods and different types of institutions. If the physical evidence for advanced ancient civilizations continues to accumulate despite systematic suppression efforts, then the institutional commitment to maintaining alternative historical narratives may be facing increasing challenges. Archaeological discoveries, technological rediscoveries, and independent research capabilities are making suppression more difficult and expensive to maintain. The question becomes whether institutional authority can continue to suppress recognition of evidence that challenges fundamental assumptions about human civilizational development, or whether the accumulating evidence will eventually force acknowledgement that human technological achievement has been systematically underestimated, and that advanced civilizations have existed before current institutions were established. The pattern of rediscovery and suppression that has erased Tartarian civilization from our historical consciousness operates within a larger, more ominous cycle, one that governs not just human memory, but human existence itself. As we trace the evidence of systematic institutional control over historical narratives, a deeper truth emerges. Those who suppress evidence of advanced ancient civilizations may understand something about cyclical catastrophe that they prefer the general population not to recognize. The 12,000-year pattern in cosmic catastrophe is not merely academic curiosity. It is an existential clock, ticking toward conditions that could reset human civilization once again. Stand outside on a clear night and look up at the torrid meteor stream as it blazes across autumn skies. What you observe is not random cosmic debris, but the remnants of a massive celestial object that fragmented thousands of years ago, spreading its remains across an orbital path that Earth intersects twice each year. Current astronomical observations reveal that we are moving deeper into the densest region of this debris field, approaching a cyclical peak that occurs every 12,000 years when our solar system's movement through the galaxy aligns us with the most concentrated portions of the fragmented comet. The mathematics are precise and unforgiving. Earth's orbit carries us through this debris field with clockwork regularity, but the density of material we encounter varies in predictable cycles. Astronomical modeling shows that the period of maximum debris density, the period when cosmic bombardment becomes not merely possible, but inevitable, returns every 12,000 years. The last peak occurred during the Younger Dryas, 12,900 years ago. The next peak is approaching within the next few centuries. Current astronomical observations provide disturbing confirmation of increasing cosmic activity. NASA's near-Earth object detection programs report unprecedented numbers of asteroid and comet discoveries in the inner solar system. The rate of detection is accelerating exponentially, suggesting not improved observational capabilities, but actual increases in the population of potentially hazardous objects approaching Earth's orbital neighborhood. Simultaneously, Atmospheric monitoring systems record increasing rates of fireball events. Cosmic objects entering Earth's atmosphere in numbers that exceed historical averages by significant margins. Why might advanced civilizations be particularly vulnerable to cosmic events that primitive societies could survive? The answer lies in the relationship between technological complexity and system fragility. Hunter-gatherer populations can relocate quickly when environments become dangerous, can survive on diverse local resources when supply chains are disrupted, and possess skills and knowledge that remain functional without industrial infrastructure. Technological civilizations become increasingly dependent on complex interconnected systems that create efficiency during stable periods but catastrophic vulnerability during crisis. Our current civilization demonstrates extreme dependence on systems that cosmic events could disable instantly. Global communication networks rely on satellite systems vulnerable to electromagnetic pulses generated by atmospheric cosmic impacts. Transportation systems depend on fuel supplies and electronic navigation systems that would fail during prolonged atmospheric disruption. Food distribution requires refrigeration, transportation, and financial systems that could collapse within days if electrical power generation were disrupted by cosmic bombardment. The relationship between technological complexity and system fragility becomes more apparent when examining the cascade effects of infrastructure failure. Modern urban populations have lost the skills and knowledge necessary for local resource production, making them entirely dependent on supply systems that extend across continental distances. When those supply systems fail, urban populations face survival challenges that rural populations with traditional skills could manage more successfully. The concentration of population in urban centers, a hallmark of advanced technological civilization, becomes a liability rather than an advantage when cosmic events disrupt the technological systems that make urban life possible. Signs that we may be approaching another cyclical boundary appear not just in astronomical observations, but in the behavior of institutions that may understand the implications of cosmic cycles better than they publicly acknowledge. The systematic suppression of research into cosmic catastrophe, the classification of astronomical observations related to potentially hazardous objects, and the marginalization of researchers who investigate civilizational vulnerability to cosmic events all suggest institutional awareness of approaching cosmic threats, combined with deliberate policy to prevent public recognition of those threats. Deep underground, military bases, DUMs, constructed by government agencies in recent decades demonstrate preparation for catastrophic events that exceed any conventional military or terrorist threats. The scale of underground construction, the technological sophistication of protection systems, and the selection of geographic locations all suggest preparation for events that could disrupt surface civilization across continental areas for extended periods. The investment in such facilities indicates institutional awareness of cosmic threats, combined with preparation strategies designed to ensure continuity of selected populations and institutions through catastrophic periods. The timing of current cosmic cycle progression coincides with other cyclic patterns that suggest convergent catastrophic pressures. Solar activity cycles, magnetic field variations, and climate patterns all appear to be approaching phases that could amplify the effects of cosmic bombardment. When multiple cyclic systems reach critical phases simultaneously, the potential for catastrophic cascade effects multiplies beyond simple additive risks. The next cosmic bombardment period may coincide with solar maximum, magnetic field reversal, and climate instability, a convergence that could create catastrophic conditions exceeding anything experienced in recorded human history. Private space programs and elite preparations for extended off-world survival suggest that some segments of current civilization understand approaching cosmic threats and are developing survival strategies that could preserve selected knowledge and populations through catastrophic periods. The resources invested in such programs indicate awareness of threats that justify expenditures exceeding typical space exploration or commercial development budgets. The secrecy surrounding many private space initiatives suggests preparation for events that would create survival scenarios rather than exploration opportunities. The cyclical nature of cosmic catastrophe implies that current human civilization may be approaching not just another natural disaster, but another complete civilizational reset. If the patterns that destroyed Tartarian civilization are indeed cyclical and predictable, then understanding those patterns becomes not merely historical curiosity, but survival necessity. The 12,000-year cycle is not just astronomical observation. It is a timer counting down toward conditions that could erase our technological achievements as completely as they erased those of our predecessors. The question becomes whether current human civilization can develop survival strategies that would preserve essential knowledge and capabilities through cosmic catastrophic periods, or whether we are destined to repeat the cycle of technological advancement, followed by catastrophic reset that appears to have governed human development throughout recorded history. The approaching cosmic cycle offers both unprecedented threat and unique opportunity. The chance to be the first human civilization to understand and prepare for cyclical catastrophic conditions rather than experiencing them as inexplicable disaster. Walk through your daily life and count the technologies that would become instantly useless if electrical power generation ceased permanently. Your smartphone, containing more computational capability than NASA used to reach the moon, would become an expensive paperweight. Your car, dependent on electronic systems for engine management and navigation, would be reduced to immobile sculpture. The infrastructure that supports modern urban life water pumps, sewage treatment, food refrigeration, communication networks, all would cease functioning within hours of power system failure. Now imagine that this technological collapse occurred not from temporary infrastructure damage, but from cosmic events that made electronic systems permanently inoperable across global distances. The fragility of digital information systems presents unprecedented vulnerabilities for civilizational knowledge preservation. Unlike stone tablets, paper documents, or even magnetic media, digital information requires active technological systems to remain accessible. The data that comprises our civilization's accumulated knowledge exists primarily in formats that need electricity, specialized hardware, and software systems to decode. When those technological requirements disappear, the information becomes permanently inaccessible, regardless of whether the physical storage media survive. Consider the implications for historical preservation. Ancient civilizations created knowledge repositories in stone, clay, and metal that remain readable thousands of years after the civilizations that created them disappeared. Medieval manuscripts, illuminated books, and paper documents preserve information that can be accessed with nothing more sophisticated than human eyesight and language skills. But our digital age has created the first civilization in human history whose accumulated knowledge could disappear completely within a single generation if the technological systems required to access that knowledge ceased functioning. The transition to digital-only information systems has accelerated dramatically in recent decades. Libraries discard physical books in favor of digital collections that require computer systems to access. Government records, scientific research, technical manuals, and educational materials exist increasingly in electronic formats that demand continuous technological infrastructure for preservation. The assumption underlying this transition that technological systems will remain stable and accessible indefinitely has never been tested by the kind of cosmic catastrophe that eliminated previous advanced civilizations. How quickly could modern infrastructure collapse under cosmic bombardment? The answer depends on understanding cascade effects that begin with electrical power generation and spread through interdependent systems until entire civilizational infrastructure ceases functioning. Cosmic events that generate electromagnetic pulses, either through direct atmospheric impacts or through disruption of Earth's magnetic field, could disable electrical generation and distribution systems across continental areas simultaneously. Without electrical power, the complex technological networks that support modern civilization would cease functioning within days. The cascade effects would accelerate as dependent systems failed in sequence. Fuel refineries and distribution systems require electrical power for operation, making transportation systems dependent on stored fuel supplies that would be exhausted within weeks. Food production and distribution systems depend on transportation, refrigeration, and financial networks that would collapse without electrical infrastructure. Water treatment and sewage systems require electrical pumps and control systems that would cease functioning immediately. The result would be urban environments becoming uninhabitable within weeks of initial power system failure. The knowledge that exists only in technological form represents an unprecedented vulnerability for civilizational continuity. Technical manuals for maintaining complex systems exist primarily in digital formats that would be inaccessible without computer systems. Scientific research, engineering specifications, and educational curricula that could be essential for rebuilding technological capabilities are stored in formats that require the same technological infrastructure they document. The individuals who possess practical knowledge of maintaining complex systems represent another vulnerable knowledge repository. They are concentrated in urban areas that would become uninhabitable during extended infrastructure failure. Why might future archaeologists struggle to understand our civilization? The materials and construction methods that define our technological achievements are precisely those least likely to survive cosmic catastrophic conditions. Steel corrodes rapidly without maintenance. Concrete structures collapse within decades when reinforcing materials fail. Electronic devices become unrecognizable assemblages of corroded metals and decomposed plastics within centuries of abandonment. The archaeological signature of our advanced technological civilization would be virtually indistinguishable from primitive societies to investigators examining remains after millennia of environmental exposure. The preservation bias that makes ancient megalithic structures seem impossibly sophisticated compared to later construction would operate in reverse for our technological civilization. The most advanced achievements of our era microprocessors, fiber optic networks, precision manufacturing utilize materials and techniques that leave virtually no archaeological traces. The largest and most durable structures we create concrete foundations, steel frameworks, transportation infrastructure represent basic construction techniques that would seem primitive to future archaeologists unaware of the technological sophistication they once supported. The importance of preserving information in durable formats becomes critical when viewed through the lens of cosmic cycle preparation. Stone carving, metal engraving, and ceramic documentation could preserve essential knowledge through catastrophic periods when electronic systems would be permanently disabled. The civilizations that created megalithic structures may have understood this preservation requirement and incorporated essential knowledge into architectural and artistic works that could survive cosmic bombardment and communicate across civilizational boundaries. Modern efforts to create durable information repositories remain inadequate for cosmic catastrophe scenarios. The Svalbard Global Seed Vault preserves genetic material but requires technological systems for utilization. Nuclear waste warning markers are designed to communicate across millennia, but focus on warning rather than preserving positive knowledge. No comprehensive program exists to preserve essential technological and cultural knowledge in formats that could survive cosmic catastrophe and remain accessible to post-catastrophe populations with limited technological capabilities. The psychological barriers to comprehensive disaster preparation reflect the same cognitive biases that prevented previous civilizations from adequately preparing for cosmic catastrophe. Modern populations, like their predecessors, find it easier to maintain faith in technological progress and institutional stability than to acknowledge vulnerability to cosmic forces beyond human control. The resources required for adequate preparation seem wasteful compared to immediate needs and opportunities. The timescales involved exceed normal planning horizons for individuals and institutions, yet the alternative facing cosmic catastrophe without preparation means risking the complete loss of human technological achievement and the reduction of survivors to conditions more primitive than those faced by hunter-gatherer societies. Our digital civilization has created unprecedented vulnerability by concentrating essential knowledge in formats that would be completely inaccessible during extended technological disruption. The question becomes whether we can develop preservation and preparation strategies adequate for cosmic catastrophe scenarios, or whether we will join the cycle of advanced civilizations that achieved technological sophistication only to lose it completely when cosmic forces reset the conditions of human existence. The approaching cosmic cycle offers a time window for preparation that previous civilizations may not have recognized or utilized effectively. Understanding the cyclical nature of cosmic catastrophe provides opportunities for preservation strategies that could maintain essential knowledge and capabilities through catastrophic periods. The challenge lies in overcoming institutional and psychological barriers that prevent adequate preparation for events that exceed normal disaster planning, while operating on timescales that transcend typical planning horizons. As we stand at the threshold of another cosmic cycle, the story of Tartarian civilization offers profound lessons about the nature of human achievement, the fragility of technological progress, and the choices that determine whether knowledge survives catastrophic transitions or disappears into the silence of geological time. What happened to the empire that once stretched across continents is not merely historical curiosity. It is a mirror reflecting our own civilizational trajectory and the ultimate test that awaits all advanced human societies when cosmic forces reshape the conditions of terrestrial existence. The Younger Dryas catastrophe teaches us that civilizational vulnerability increases rather than decreases with technological advancement. The same specialization, centralization, and interdependence that enable sophisticated technologies to flourish also create systematic weaknesses that cosmic catastrophe can exploit with devastating efficiency. Tartarian civilization, with its continent-spanning coordination, advanced energy systems, and sophisticated urban infrastructure, may have been more vulnerable to sudden disruption than simpler societies that maintained local resource bases and distributed knowledge systems. This paradox of technological advancement reveals itself in archaeological patterns that show sudden civilizational collapse rather than gradual adaptation to changing conditions. When cosmic bombardment disrupted the complex systems that supported Tartarian civilization, the result was not technological regression, but technological elimination. The survivors faced circumstances that made preservation of advanced capabilities not just difficult, but actively counterproductive to immediate survival needs. The choice between maintaining sophisticated knowledge systems and ensuring population continuity was resolved in favor of survival, resulting in the complete abandonment of technological achievements that had required centuries or millennia to develop. The difference between preparation and prevention becomes crucial when examining civilizational responses to cosmic catastrophe. Prevention of cosmic bombardment exceeds current human technological capabilities and may be impossible regardless of technological advancement. The forces involved: fragmented comets, asteroid swarms, electromagnetic disruption operate on scales that dwarf human engineering capabilities. But preparation for surviving cosmic catastrophe represents achievable goals that could preserve essential knowledge and capabilities through catastrophic periods. Effective preparation requires understanding the specific mechanisms through which cosmic catastrophe destroys civilizational infrastructure. Electromagnetic pulse effects disable electronic systems but do not necessarily destroy mechanical technologies. Atmospheric disruption creates climate instability, but does not necessarily eliminate all regions suitable for human habitation. Flooding destroys surface infrastructure but may preserve underground facilities. Preparation strategies based on understanding these mechanisms could maintain essential capabilities through catastrophic periods rather than requiring complete civilizational reconstruction from primitive conditions. Why is understanding the past crucial for surviving the future? The cyclical nature of cosmic catastrophe means that the conditions that destroyed previous advanced civilizations will recur with mathematical precision. The lessons learned from Tartarian collapse about the vulnerability of centralized systems, the importance of distributed knowledge preservation, and the psychological dynamics of post-catastrophe adaptation provide practical guidance for developing survival strategies appropriate for current technological circumstances. The systematic suppression of evidence for advanced ancient civilizations may reflect institutional awareness of approaching cosmic catastrophe combined with deliberate policy to prevent public recognition of cyclical civilizational vulnerability. If elite groups understand cosmic cycles and are preparing privately for catastrophic conditions while preventing public awareness and preparation, then the general population may be facing cosmic catastrophe with even less preparation than previous civilizations managed. The suppression of Tartarian evidence serves not just political and academic interests, but survival strategies that depend on controlling information about catastrophic vulnerability. The possibility that someone is already preparing for the next reset appears in contemporary institutional behavior that exceeds rational responses to conventional threats. Underground facility construction, space-based survival programs, genetic preservation projects, and technological development programs that prioritize off-world capabilities rather than terrestrial applications, all suggest preparation for events that would make surface civilization uninhabitable for extended periods. The resources invested in such programs indicate institutional awareness of specific threats that justify expenditures beyond normal disaster preparedness budgets. But institutional preparation strategies that prioritize elite survival while maintaining public ignorance of catastrophic threats may be counterproductive for species-level survival. The knowledge and capabilities required for rebuilding technological civilization after cosmic catastrophe exist primarily in the general population rather than elite institutions. Scientists, engineers, technicians, and skilled craftspeople whose knowledge would be essential for post-catastrophe reconstruction are precisely the populations that current elite preparation strategies seem designed to exclude from survival planning. Are we the ancients of the future? The question forces recognition that our technological achievements, our urban centers, our accumulated knowledge, everything we consider permanent and progressive, may be as temporary and vulnerable as the Tartarian Empire that disappeared so completely from historical memory. Future archaeologists examining the remains of our civilization may face the same interpretive challenges that we face when examining megalithic sites. Sophisticated achievements that seem impossible for their supposed time periods, construction techniques that exceed officially attributed capabilities, and evidence of technological systems whose functions remain mysterious because the supporting infrastructure has vanished. What would we want them to remember? This question illuminates the responsibility that advanced civilizations bear for preserving essential knowledge across catastrophic boundaries. The architects of megalithic structures may have faced similar questions when they realized that cosmic catastrophe was approaching, their solution incorporating essential mathematical, astronomical, and technological knowledge into massive stone constructions that could survive cosmic bombardment may represent the most effective long-term information preservation strategy ever implemented by human civilization. Our digital age presents both unprecedented opportunities and unprecedented challenges for knowledge preservation across catastrophic boundaries. We possess more information than any previous civilization, but most of it exists in formats that would be completely inaccessible during extended technological disruption. We have global communication capabilities that could coordinate preparation strategies across continental distances, but we also have institutional systems that actively suppress recognition of catastrophic threats and prevent public participation in survival planning. The lesson of Tartaria is ultimately about choice. The choice between acknowledging catastrophic vulnerability and developing appropriate preparation strategies, or maintaining comfortable illusions of technological security until cosmic forces impose reality with violence that erases civilizational achievement as completely as floodwaters erased Tartarian cities. The cyclical nature of cosmic catastrophe means that this choice recurs for every human civilization that achieves technological sophistication. Previous civilizations appear to have chosen inadequate preparation. The question remains whether our civilization can choose differently. The approaching cosmic cycle offers both ultimate threat and ultimate opportunity. The possibility of becoming the first human civilization to maintain technological capabilities and essential knowledge through cosmic catastrophic conditions. This would require overcoming institutional barriers to catastrophic recognition, developing preservation strategies adequate for cosmic bombardment scenarios, and creating survival systems that could maintain civilizational continuity through extended periods of environmental instability. The alternative, repeating the cycle of technological achievement followed by catastrophic loss, means accepting that human civilization will remain perpetually vulnerable to cosmic forces that reset terrestrial conditions with predictable regularity. The choice between these alternatives will determine not just whether our civilization survives the approaching cosmic cycle, but whether human technological development can finally transcend the cyclical limitations that have governed our species throughout its history. Standing at this crossroads, with the evidence of previous civilizational cycles spread before us in stone and sediment, in suppressed archaeological discoveries and marginalized research, we face the ultimate test of human wisdom. Can we learn from the fate of those who came before us? Or are we destined to become the ancients of the future, leaving behind only mysterious architectural witnesses to puzzle future archaeologists who will wonder how such sophisticated achievements could have disappeared so completely from human memory? The cosmic clock is ticking, the choice remains ours to make.